Chapter 3684. Meng Jueguang nodded his head and said, "Pavilion Master, if you were the only one here to face the three elders of the Back Mountain Hall, it would indeed be very difficult for us to succeed. But isn't young Master Su here today? The Back Mountain Hall elders are also people. Don't tell me they won't give young Master Su this little bit of face?" Su Lingchong immediately smiled. Perhaps he didn't have the ability to make the three elders present publicly distort the truth, but if it was just to make them turn a blind eye to such a small matter, then it wouldn't be a problem at all. No matter what, his grandfather, Su Yuanjing, was a big shot who occupied a seat in the Elders' Council. Even the three Back Mountain Hall elders present had to give him face. As for whether the three elders would cooperate, this was actually very obvious. After all, even if Su Lingchong and company spoke softly, with the strength of the three elders, there was no way they could hide from their senses. And from the beginning to the end, they didn't open their mouths to stop them. They didn't even say a word. This in itself already represented their tacit agreement. After obtaining the approval of Su Lingchong and Hu Yunfeng, Meng Jueguang immediately turned around and returned to the newcomers. He inadvertently glanced at Lin Yi's direction, but the situation in front of him gave him a huge shock. Just as he and Su Lingchong were plotting, the young lady of Laner actually lowered her status and took the initiative to look for Lin Yi. It must be known that she wasn't just a simple beauty with unparalleled beauty. More importantly, she was the granddaughter of the Soaring Sky Pavilion's pavilion master, Shanghai Tianhua. To be able to make this young lady, who was as noble as a princess, take the initiative to strike up a conversation, Lin Yi, this country bumpkin of the secular world, must have accumulated the good fortune of several lifetimes. Not only Meng Jueguang, the other newcomers present were also looking at Lin Yi with the same gaze. Each and every one of them were envious, jealous, and even wanted to use their gazes to kill him. And then replace him. Even young Master Su Lingchong's expression changed when he saw this scene. It should be known that he was one of the many pursuers of Shangguan Laner. His grandfather, Su Yuanjing, had warned him more than once that if he wanted to rise in the Soaring Sky Pavilion in the future, he must hold on to the thigh of Shangguan Tianhua, and pursuing Shanghai Laner was the best way to do so. It was related to the future of the Su family. There was no room for error on this point. Therefore, in recent years young Master Su, had spent countless efforts to capture the heart of a young girl. In the end, Shangguan Laner had always ignored him. Unexpectedly, today she had taken the initiative to strike up a conversation with Lin Yi, this country bumpkin of the secular world. How could he endure this? This feeling was like a tall, rich and handsome man being defeated by a poor man. Little did he know that Shanghai Laner had never thought of taking the initiative to strike up a conversation with Lin Yi. She was completely forced to strike up a conversation. The one who wholeheartedly wanted to get close to Lin Yi was obviously the little curly bear, who was hanging on her back but couldn't wait to burrow into Lin Yi's arms. This little bastard who betrays me while secretly helping others. Shanghai Laner secretly cursed. However, under the little curly bear's coquettish attack, she couldn't bear to ignore it. She could only grit her teeth and bear the strange gazes of the audience. Fortunately, Lin Yi wasn't as annoying as she'd imagined. If it was someone else, they would definitely be like Su Lingchong and the others, asking all sorts of questions in order to get close to her. However, Lin Yi didn't have the intention to climb up the stick. He just greeted her with a normal expression and didn't say anything more. However, in this way. On the contrary, Shanghai Laner, who was used to being surrounded by stars, had a strange feeling. What did this Lin Yi mean? Could it be that she wasn't attractive in his eyes? After noticing the strange resentment in Shangguan Laner's eyes, Zhang Xian was stunned. Lin Yi was completely baffled. From the beginning to the end, he didn't offend this missy at all. However, Lin Yi didn't have the mood to care about this missy's subtle state of mind. From Meng Jueguang's strange actions just now, he had already felt a trace of a conspiracy. And now, Hu Yunfeng finally planned to announce the final rankings. Before announcing the final trial results of the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers, due to the trial process, a portion of Meng Tong's elixir was temporarily deposited in Li Jingming's basket. Therefore, the points of this portion of elixir will need to be recalculated. I can only ask the Back Mountain Hall's pharmacist to work hard again. Hu Yunfeng's expression didn't change as she spoke eloquently. The newcomers in front had already finished announcing the scores, so it couldn't be changed. However, Li Jingming's score had yet to be announced. Furthermore, from Meng Jueguang's point of view, Li Jingming was closer and easier to cooperate with. The newcomers from the three pavilions were immediately in an uproar. Although Hu Yunfeng's words were high-sounding, anyone with a discerning eye knew that it was cheating. However, even the three elders turned a blind eye to it. The newcomers naturally wouldn't take the risk of offending Su Lingchong and Hu Yunfeng to question it. After all, it had nothing to do with them, so they didn't care. Holy shit, this is too shameless. Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai couldn't help but be infuriated. This shameless move was clearly targeted at Lin Yi. Senior brother Bitter could not help but protest, but he was stopped by Lin Yi. Although the opponent's method was shameless and despicable, the fact that the three elders did not say a word was already a clear indication of the problem. They were all alone, so if they were to protest in such a situation, it would put these important figures on the spot. Then things would be difficult to deal with in the future. However, Lin Yi did not plan on giving up the first place of the trial so easily. He wanted to see what other tricks the opponent had up his sleeve. The apothecary quickly gave the result. Meng Tong's final score 1,800 points. The moment this was said, everyone was stunned. 1,800 points, not a single point less or less. It happened to be tied with Lin Yi's score. Not only did the crowd not expect this scene, even Meng Jueguang and the others did not expect this at all. He had specifically asked Li Jingming to take out more than 200 points worth of elixirs. In the end, he did not expect this guy to be so stingy and take out exactly 200 points, not a single point more. Are you crazy, kid? Would it kill you to give me one more point? Now I'm tied with that bastard Lin Yi. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Meng Tong couldn't help but curse in exasperation. This opportunity to turn defeat into victory was something that Meng Jueguang had fought so hard for. If all his efforts were to go down the drain because of Li Jingming's stinginess, then it would really be a big joke. Hearing Meng Tong's words, Li Jingming's face instantly turned extremely gloomy. Motherfucker, I've already contributed 200 points to you for free. Not only did you not say a word of thanks, but you're also cursing at me. How can you be so cheap? Chapter 3685. Even Meng Jueguang couldn't bear to watch Meng Tong's stupidity any longer. After gesturing for him to shut up, Meng Jueguang turned to Li Jingming and said in a low voice, Jingming, why don't you take out some more spiritual herbs before the final announcement of the rankings? After all, if we have the same number of points, it won't be easy. Li Jingming gritted his teeth and looked at Meng Jueguang. He said in a low voice, Senior Meng, I have 320 points right now and am ranked 10th. If I take out another spiritual herb, then I will fall out of the top 10. Li Jingming didn't have too bad of a medicinal herb in his possession. The lowest points he had were 2 points, and the 11th ranked person had 319 points. Even if he took out the lowest point medicinal herb, he would still be ranked 11th. Meng Jueguang was slightly surprised and said, You want the reward for the top 10? No problem. As long as Meng Tong gets first place, I will have him compensate you with 5 pieces of spiritual jades. This is much more generous than the 3 pieces of spiritual jades you get for the top 10, right? Unexpectedly, Li Jingming was not moved at all. He shook his head and said, Senior Meng, you misunderstand. I am not greedy for this little bit of spiritual jades. I just don't want to fall out of the top 10. In all the official competitions of the Welcoming Pavilion, whether it is the newcomer's trial or the ranking competition, as long as you fall out of the top 10, it will leave an indelible stain on your resume. Once you carry this stain, it means that you are lacking in at least one aspect. Even if you enter the Blue Cloud Pavilion in the future, you won't be valued and will only be reduced to a marginal character. These words were personally said by you, Senior Meng. With this, Meng Jueguang was immediately speechless. These words that Li Jingming said were indeed taught by him, and they were the truth. It was just that he didn't think that these words would have such an effect at a time like this. And it was even counterproductive. In that case, if it was just to let Meng Tong take first place over Lin Yi and force Li Jingming out of the top 10, it was indeed a little unreasonable. No matter what, Li Jingming was the first newcomer besides Meng Tong to rely on him. It was not a good thing for him to cheat his own people. If word of this got out, it would probably disturb people's morale. However, with the situation having developed to this point, he could not use the same trick again. He could not possibly say that Meng Tong had left some elixirs with other rookies, right? That would simply be an insult to the intelligence of everyone present. Perhaps even the 3 elders would not continue to acquiesce. Now that things had come to this, they could only let young Master Su think of a way to exert some influence. Fortunately, although Meng Tong's current score was not higher than Lin Yi's, it was not lower either. It should be easier to manipulate. Meng Jueguang explained the situation to Su Lingchong and Hu Yunfeng in detail. Although Su Lingchong was a little dissatisfied that this guy couldn't even do such a small thing properly, handle such a small matter, He could only nod with a gloomy face in order to prevent Lin Yi from taking first place. After all, at this time, other than him personally appearing, the others including Hu Yunfeng were too low level. There was no way they could directly talk to the three elders, and it was even more impossible for them to do them a favor. Su Lingchong rushed over and said a few words to the bald elder sitting in the middle. Then he nodded to Hu Yunfeng and Meng Jueguang. The matter was settled. Hu Yunfeng were instantly overjoyed. They secretly praised young Master Su in their hearts. No matter where he went, he was popular. Even the elders of the back mountain hall had to give him face. However, the two of them were really thinking too much. Although young Master Su's face was not small, it was definitely not to the point where even the elders would have to give him a favor. The reason why he was able to settle it so smoothly this time. It was entirely because this bald elder had a good personal relationship with his grandfather, Su Yuanzheng. Otherwise, even he, young Master Su, would not even be able to say a word to him. In the three great pavilions, regardless of whether one entered the Elders' Guild or not, any elder was a big shot. Ordinary disciples could only tremble in fear in front of them. This was a rule that even someone with a powerful background like young Master Su could not easily overstep. Of course, if it was an elder who had a good relationship with his grandfather, then it would be a different story. After receiving Su Lingchong's signal, Hu Yunfeng cleared his throat and said in a clear voice, "Now that the final score is out, Meng Tong has 1,800 points and Lin Yi has 1,800 points, both of them are tied for first place. But according to the rules of the previous rookie trials, there has never been such a thing as a tie. If the two people end up with the same number of points, then the elders stationed at the back mountain hall will determine the winner based on their performance in the trial." These three elders were actually able to observe everyone's behavior and performance during the trial? Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat, but after thinking about it, he understood. Since Hu Yunfeng said this in front of everyone, it shouldn't be nonsense, so it was clear that there was something going on. With the powerful strength of these three elders, if they were to cooperate with the various restrictions and arrays in the back mountain, it shouldn't be too difficult to monitor the situation in the back mountain. After all, their main task was to protect the back mountain. If they couldn't even do the most basic monitoring, how could they protect it? However, Lin Yi believed that even if it was monitoring, it definitely wouldn't be too detailed. At most, they would only pay attention to a few places with relatively large movements. After all, the back mountain was so big. If they really paid attention to every place, then not to mention the three elders, even if there were 30 or 300 people, they would only be exhausted to death. This made Lin Yi secretly keep an eye out. If he were to enter the back mountain in the future, he had to be careful when he did something big. If not, he didn't know when his secret would be discovered by others, and that would be troublesome. Under Hu Yunfeng's request, the people involved, Lin Yi and Meng Tong, walked to an empty space in front, so that the elders could recall their performance during the trial. Everyone held their breaths and waited. The bald elder in the middle, who had the most authority to speak, carefully examined the two of them. Just as he was about to announce the results, there was a sudden commotion from the rookies below. Then a little guy with black and white clothes jumped out from the crowd and jumped onto Lin Yi's back. The bald elder's eyebrows twitched. Just as he was about to reprimand him, the pretty figure that followed made him swallow the scolding he was about to say. There was no other reason. The girl's background was so deep that even he was frightened. Chapter 3686. Little White, come back, they're doing something serious. Shanghai Laner quickly tried to pull the little curly bear back, but it refused to let go of Lin Yi. No matter what she said, it refused to come down from Lin Yi. Woo 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 woo. Not only did it refuse to come down, but the little curly bear kept calling out, as if it wanted to express something. Shanghai Laner was stunned. Others might not understand the little curly bear's whining, but she grew up with it. She didn't dare to say that she understood 100% of the little curly bear's meaning, but it wasn't a problem for her to understand 80%. Are you saying that you want Lin Yi to get first place and that Meng Tong is a bad guy? Shanghai Laner frowned and asked. Her suspicious eyes then fell on Meng Tong. With the little curly bear's closeness to Lin Yi, it was easy to understand that it wanted Lin Yi to get first place, but it was a bit strange to say that Meng Tong was a bad guy because of this. One had to know that the little curly bear wasn't as organic as humans. It always said what it said, and it would never deliberately belittle Meng Tong just to let Lin Yi get first place. It must have its reasons for saying so. Looking at Shanghai Laner's meaningful gaze falling on him, Meng Tong instantly broke out in a cold sweat. The only thought in his mind at the moment was, damn, could it be that the truth has been exposed, and this little thing has recalled the situation that day? This was not impossible. Although the little curly bear was still in its infancy, its intelligence was comparable to that of a human child. At this time, it was not strange for it to recall the incident that day. You tell me, what did you do to my little white? Little white would never slander you without any reason. This was related to the little curly bear. Shanghai Laner's expression suddenly became serious, and she stared at Meng Tong and questioned. Although she didn't always like to think. But that didn't mean she didn't know how to use her brain. Now that she thought about it, the situation of looking for the little curly bear was indeed a little strange. At least, what Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong said must have been false. However, it was already late at that time, and they had successfully found the little curly bear, so she did not care about it. And no. Meng Tong hurriedly stammered in denial. If the matter of that day was dug out, then his ending would be very ugly. No? Shangguan Laner looked at him suspiciously. He then turned to the little curly bear. Little white, why did you say that this guy is a bad guy? Did he do anything bad to you? Woo 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 woo. The little curly bear made a series of gestures with his hands and feet, and he specially pointed at Meng Tong a few times. Meng Tong's heart was in his throat for a moment. Even Meng Jueguang, who was standing not far away, saw this scene and was also scared to the point that he was drenched in cold sweat. He was afraid that the case would be solved in public. That would really be a big problem. As for Linny, he looked at all of this calmly and coldly. If the little curly bear could really recall the specific situation of that day, then Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong would definitely be doomed. This would save him a lot of trouble. Shanghai Laner pondered for a long time before she understood the meaning of the little curly bear. She said helplessly, Little white, you are saying that Meng Tong's breath is very annoying. Seems like he kicked you in your dream. Is he not a good person? Woo woo. The little curly bear nodded repeatedly. Holy shit. It turned out that this little thing didn't even think about it. It was just instinctively annoyed. Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong looked at each other and heaved a sigh of relief, but they were still afraid. Spirit beasts like the curly roll bear. Its perception was much more sensitive than ordinary people, even if it did not have a clear memory. But subconsciously he would still be on guard against things that had hurt him. However, as long as it didn't clearly recall the situation that day, everything would be fine. After all, even a young lady like Shangguan Laner wouldn't directly come forward to deal with the two of them just because of a baseless accusation and a pet's hobby. Alright, I'm fine. You guys can continue. Shangguan Laner rolled her eyes at the little fellow. Just as Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong thought, she was the granddaughter of Shangguan Tianhua. In such a public occasion, she had to consider Shangguan Tianhua's image in every word and action. She couldn't just accompany the little fellow and throw a tantrum. The bald elder nodded and was about to announce the result. Unexpectedly, Shanghai Laner pouted at Meng Tong and said, Although I don't have any grudges with you, since even little white hates you so much, it means that you're really not a good person. Meng Tong suddenly wanted to cry but had no tears. He was still rejoicing that he had escaped a calamity. In the end, he was immediately blacklisted by this young lady. Everything was really unfavorable for him today. But fortunately, the abuse of the little curly bear that day was not solved on the spot. To him, this was already a blessing in disguise. Moreover, he was able to obtain first place in the trial today. At least he could comfort himself. However, what the bald elder said next almost made him spit out a mouthful of blood. In this trial, although the points of the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers Meng Tong and Lin Yi are the same, looking at the whole process of the trial, Meng Tong incited the other newcomers to besiege Lin Yi. He was opportunistic and had a bad character. Therefore, I believe that the first place in this Blue Cloud Pavilion trial belongs to Lin Yi. Do you have any objections? What the hell? The first place belongs to Lin Yi. From Su Lingchong and Hu Yunfeng to Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong, everyone was dumbfounded. It was clearly said that Meng Tong would be first. That wasn't how the script was written? No objections. The two elders at the side nodded. As for the others, even if they had any objections, they did not have the slightest right to speak. Not even Su Lingchong, young Master Su. Then that's it. The bald elder's last sentence directly sealed the coffin of this newcomer trial. What the hell? Su Lingchong and the others were dumbfounded. This sudden change in the situation was too sudden. Su Lingchong stared at the bald elder in disbelief. This was simply standing him up in front of everyone. Even if he did not agree from the start, it was still better than going back on his word. With this, where would he put his face as a young master? Previously, he had confidently vowed to Hu Yunfeng and the others that he could easily settle it. The bald elder gave him a look and pointed in the direction of Shangguan Laner. His meaning was very clear. Between young Master Su and Miss Shangguan, the latter's face was obviously bigger. Even if Su Yuanjing was a big shot in the Elders Guild, how could he compare to Shangguan Tianhua, the owner of Soaring Sky Pavilion? Chapter 3687. If Missy were to go back to Shanghai Tianhua and leave a bad impression on him, even if he was a high and mighty elder, he would be beaten down to the ground sooner or later. After all, the elders who had fallen under Shanghai Tianhua's iron fist were not just one or two. Su Lingchong had nothing to say. If he was in the position of the bald elder, he would have done the same. In fact, when he thought about it, he was glad that the bald elder did not award the first place to Meng Tong. If he had left a bad impression on Shanghai Laner because of this, he would have suffered a great loss. On the other hand, letting Lin Yi get first place by luck didn't really matter to him, other than losing face a little. It didn't matter at all. Since even Su Lingchong did not say anything, the other small characters like Meng Jueguang naturally did not dare to say anything. They could only watch as Lin Yi received the first place reward. Thank you for letting me win. Lin Yi smiled faintly and waved the bag of extra 10 pieces of spiritual jade in front of them. Jiske, what a villain. Meng Tong's face was extremely ugly as he curled his lips. He felt as if he had eaten hundreds of flies. It was extremely disgusting, but he could only pinch his nose and swallow it down. Although Meng Jueguang also had a gloomy face, his eyes lit up when he saw the bag of spiritual jade in Lin Yi's hand. He said softly, "It's okay. Let him be happy for a while and go back to mess with some useless jade. This bag of good jade will be ours sooner or later." Ninth cousin is brilliant. Meng Tong's heart was instantly balanced. He gritted his teeth and said, "One day, when this kid finds out that all the spiritual jade he has accumulated are useless jade, I want to see what kind of expression he will have then." Of course, he will definitely cry until he dies. Meng Jueguang smiled coldly. Maybe the blow is too big and his heart might fall out. For ordinary people, even if a piece of scrap jade was exchanged for a piece of good jade, it would be worth it. They would feel heartache for at least half a day. For people like Lin Yi, who had been exchanged for more than 10 or even dozens of yuan in a row, when he came to his senses, his heart would probably be bleeding from the pain. The rookie trial finally came to an end with this dramatic turn of events. Lin Yi was first, Xiao Ran was third, and Xiao Hongkai was fourth, although they did not take the top 3 spots. But compared to the dismal results of the newcomers under Meng Jueguang, this was a great harvest. Meng Jueguang had a total of 12 newcomers under his command. Other than Meng Tong, who had obtained second place and was able to obtain a building foundation pill as a consolation prize, the others were completely insignificant. Compared to the crucial reward of the building foundation pill, the 3 pieces of spiritual jades that were distributed to them could not even be considered as a consolation prize. And there was something even worse than this. Out of the 12 people, 5 of them did not even get 3 pieces of spiritual jades as a consolation prize. Not only did they not get any benefits, they also fell out of the top 10 in their first trial and entered the blacklist. They simply wanted to cry but had no tears. For a moment, all the newcomers looked at Meng Jueguang with resentment. They had initially pledged their allegiance to Meng Jueguang in hopes of getting more benefits. But now, not only did they not get any benefits, they even threw away their bright future. It was simply a scam. Are all of you trash? Lin Yi and his team only had 3 people, and the 12 of you couldn't even deal with them? And you still have the face to complain to me? What's there to complain about? After returning from the back mountain hall, Meng Jueguang gathered all the newcomers and could not help but roar. It was within his expectations. The blacklisting of Lin Yi and his team was a done deal. After all, no matter what, everyone was an expert of the same level. It was really inexcusable for the 12 of them to fail against 3 people. All the newcomers looked at Meng Tong. Meng Tong had no choice but to stand up and explain, "Ninth cousin, the original plan was indeed going smoothly, but something happened that directly messed up our entire plan. You really can't blame us for not putting in enough effort." "Can't blame you for not putting in enough effort? Alright, tell me what accident happened in the middle that allowed them to reverse such a huge disadvantage." Meng Jueguang said snappily. "Ninth cousin, you probably couldn't tell previously, but Lin Yi is now an early-stage foundation establishment expert." Meng Tong smiled bitterly at Meng Jueguang. "What? Early-stage foundation establishment expert?" Meng Jueguang originally thought that Meng Tong would come up with some far-fetched reason, but after hearing that he was shocked. He looked at everyone in disbelief. "That's impossible, right? Did all of you see it?" Everyone nodded in unison. Meng Tong said with a bitter face, I saw it with my own eyes. We had already surrounded him and were about to succeed, but he wasn't afraid of us at all. He released the aura of an early-stage foundation establishment expert and scared all of us on the spot. All the newcomers looked strangely at Meng Tong. It was true that everyone was scared silly, but if not for Meng Tong being the first to escape causing panic, the situation would not have fallen into Lin Yi's complete control. After all, there were 12 of them and Lin Yi still had Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai, these two exhausted burdens. If they really fought back then, it was hard to tell who would win or lose in the end. However, Meng Tong obviously wouldn't say such a shameful thing. If he didn't say it, the others naturally wouldn't say anything, or else they would offend him, and they would definitely make things difficult for them in the future. Seeing everyone say it in unison, Meng Jueguang had no choice but to believe it. So, Lin Yi really broke through to the early-stage foundation establishment? But from his aura just now, it doesn't seem like it. He's no different from you heaven-stage great perfection experts. Did you really fight him to confirm it? Oh, we didn't. At that time, we saw that the situation wasn't good, so we directly dispersed on the spot, Meng Tong answered awkwardly. You didn't fight? Meng Jueguang was stunned and pondered, so you're saying that you were just scared by his aura? Everyone looked at each other and finally nodded. Although it was shameful to say it, they were indeed scared by Lin Yi's aura. That's right, you must have seen wrongly. Chapter 3688. That's possible? Meng Tong and the group of rookies looked at each other. Now that they recalled the situation back then, it did seem a little strange. It's very simple. If Lin Yi is really an early-stage foundation establishment expert, then the aura he usually shows should be that of an early-stage foundation establishment expert, and not the heaven-stage great perfection like all of you. Think about it, it's only been less than a month. Even the Soaring Sky Pavilion and the Mysterious Pavilion have not succeeded in building their foundation. How could Lin Yi, a mere kid from the secular world, be more awesome than the rookies? Bullshit. Meng Jueguang paused, then asked, besides, all of you just said that after Lin Yi scared all of you, he didn't do anything to you and just let you run away, right? Yes. The rookies nodded. This confirms my speculation even more. Meng Jueguang sneered and analyzed, think about it, with your previous conflicts with Lin Yi, if he really is an early-stage foundation establishment expert, with his ruthless style of daring to injure Meng Tong on the first day, why would he let you off so easily? Even if he can't kill you due to the trial rules, it shouldn't be a problem to cripple you, right? The rookies were stunned. This was also the question they were most puzzled about. Ignoring the fact that Meng Tong and Li Jingming had run away first, the rest of them only got 100 points each. This was too easy on them. So it's clear that he's afraid that once he really starts fighting, it won't be easy to clean up after the limit golden core effect disappears. After all, the limit golden core effect lasts for a very short time. To him, the safest method is to use his aura to scare all of you. The more Meng Jueguang said, the more he felt that the possibility was high. It was almost more than 90%. So you're saying that all of us were fooled by that kid Lin Yi? Damn, this brat is too treacherous. After Meng Tong reacted, he couldn't help but gnash his teeth in hatred. Based on the situation at that time, if they hadn't been frightened by Lin Yi, they could have completely wiped out Lin Yi and the other two. If that had been the case, there wouldn't have been so many twists and turns later. Lin Yi wouldn't have been able to compete with him for the first place, but it was very likely that he would be last. But senior apprentice brother Meng, the feeling I got from Lin Yi was, it doesn't look like she's faking it, right? Li Jingming was still a little skeptical. Meng Tong rolled his eyes at him and sneered, are you stupid? Since he has made up his mind to deceive us, of course he has to pretend to be confident. Otherwise, how can he deceive us? He's a newbie who likes to act tough. Isn't he the best at acting tough? Li Jingming immediately stopped talking. Other than Meng Tong, although the other newbies also believed 70 to 80%, they still had the same doubts as Li Jingming in their hearts. If Lin Yi had only deceived one or two of them, it would be easier to understand. But there were 12 of them and there were bound to be a few who were more observant. Wasn't Lin Yi's acting skills a little too good if he was able to trick all of them with just one extreme jindan? Meng Jueguang looked at everyone's expression and said, although there's a 90% chance that Lin Yi relied on a golden core to deceive them, there's only 2 days left before the ranking competition. This kind of thing can't be sloppy. How about this, one of you go and test the truth. I'll give him a piece of spiritual jade as a reward. Everyone looked at each other, but no one stood up. Although they also believed that Lin Yi was very likely to be pretending, what if he wasn't? What if he was a genuine early-stage foundation establishment realm master? If they rashly tested him for a piece of spiritual jade, wouldn't that be courting death? Moreover, with Lin Yi's strength, even if he wasn't an early-stage Foundation Establishment Realm Master, judging from his performance when he defeated Meng Tong in one move, it was absolutely a piece of cake for him to deal with them one-on-one. Wouldn't it be obvious that they were looking for a beating if they went over? Seeing this, Meng Jueguang had no choice but to call out a name. Meng Tong, you lead the way and test him. Meng Tong immediately flinched. Although he was 100% sure that Lin Yi wasn't an early-stage Foundation Establishment Realm Master, he was still afraid of being beaten up. He rolled his eyes and immediately declined. Ninth cousin, this good opportunity to make a contribution should be given to Jingming. He just happens to need spiritual jade. That's fine. Then Jingming, you go. Meng Jueguang waved his hand. Fuck. Li Jingming instantly exploded in anger. This bastard Meng Tong didn't dare to go, so he pushed this kind of hard task to me. He even said that it was giving me a chance to make a contribution. Fucking shameless. However, since Meng Jueguang had already said so, he didn't give him a chance to refuse. Unless he had a falling out with Meng Jueguang on the spot, he could only bite the bullet and accept it. In the end, Li Jingming gritted his teeth. For the sake of revenge, I'll endure it. On the other hand, compared to Meng Jueguang's group of people who were gloomy and suspicious, Lin Yi and the others were in a good mood. They even had a few drinks together to celebrate. During the meal, after listening to Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai describe the process of the test, Bitter Shixiang looked at Lin Yi with his mouth wide open. Junior brother Lin, you're exaggerating. You've only been here for less than a month and you've already reached foundation level. If I remember correctly, you're not only the first among the newcomers, but you've also broken the record. Although many newcomers were already Sky Class Full Circle Masters when they first entered the pavilion, from Sky Class Full Circle to Foundation Level Early Phase, other than putting in a huge amount of effort and resources, luck was also indispensable. Some people would be stuck at this level for decades, but if the luck wasn't there, they still wouldn't be able to break through the last barrier. In the history of the Welcome Pavilion, the record holder for the fastest Foundation establishment was none other than Miracle Dr. Zhang Liju, whose record was 48 days. And Lin Yi was at least 20 days ahead of him. I've already reached Foundation level before I came here. Lin Yi smiled bitterly, but he couldn't tell them the truth. Compared to breaking the record in the pavilion, the fact that he had reached Foundation level in the mortal world where spirit energy was sparse was even more shocking. If news of this got out, he might be captured and dissected for research purposes. After a few vague words, Lin Yi turned to the others and said seriously, Bitter Shixiang, Xiao Ran and Hong Kai, don't tell anyone that I've reached Foundation level yet. After all, it's better to keep a low profile. Hiding some of your strength might be useful at a critical moment. Chapter 3689. Lin Yi shook his head. Not necessarily, I only showed off the aura of an early phase foundation, I didn't actually fight them. With Meng Jueguang and the others' suspicious personalities, they'll definitely be suspicious after this. Bitter Shixiang and Xiao Ran looked at each other and nodded, alright. After all, everyone had their own way of doing things, and since Lin Yi chose to keep a low profile, they would naturally try their best to cooperate. Bitter Shixiang thought about it. Based on past years, the newcomers usually stay in the pavilion for a full year, but if they succeed in their foundation establishment, they're allowed to enter the 3 pavilions early to become an inner disciple. What are your plans for the future, Lin Yi? Are there any additional benefits to becoming an inner disciple early? Lin Yi asked back. Other than being valued by the sect's higher-ups, the main benefit is that you can enjoy some of the benefits of being an inner disciple early. Other than that, there's nothing else, Bitter Shixiang explained. Then forget it, I'll stay in the pavilion for a while and improve my strength first. Lin Yi shook his head. With his condition, he didn't need the so-called benefits of the sect very much, and if he chose to enter Blue Cloud Pavilion early, not only would he not get any obvious benefits, but he would also be valued by the sect's higher-ups. There would be countless troubles that would follow, and he might as well stay in the pavilion to accumulate his strength first. After all, compared to other places, the pavilion was definitely a gentle cradle, there weren't that many problems, and it was perfect for training. Lin Yi knew very well that if he wanted to go to Middle Island to find Zhang Liju, other than improving his strength, anything else would be a waste of time. No matter where he went, strength was the way to go. Yeah, that's good, Bitter Shixiang nodded. Over the years in the Welcome Pavilion, he had seen many outstanding newcomers. After coming to the 3 pavilions, they immediately became ordinary not because they were weaker but because the environment they were in was stronger. At the end of the day, the pavilion was just a school. The three pavilions were the real cruel society. The early phase of foundation establishment was already very good in the pavilion, but in the three pavilions it was nothing. Lin Yi's decision to stay in the welcoming pavilion was a very wise one. At that moment, Lin Yi suddenly remembered something and pushed the foundation establishment pill in front of Qiao Hongkai. Smiling, he said, "In any case, I already have no use for it. I'll give this foundation building pill to you. You two also have to break through as soon as possible." Qiao Hongkai paused. Lin Yi had talked about this during the test, but now that the pill was right in front of him, he couldn't help but blush with excitement. This was the foundation building pill that all newcomers yearned for. Even those second-generation cultivators with deep backgrounds in the Soaring Sky Pavilion were unable to obtain it. There were also those powerful old men from the Profound Pavilion. In order to fight for a single foundation establishment pill, they had also used all sorts of methods and schemes in the trial. But even so, they were unable to obtain it. In the end, most people still couldn't get it even though they wanted it. On the other hand, he was an ordinary grassroots newcomer with no background, and his strength wasn't that great, so he didn't get any decent results in the trial. Even the elixirs were all snatched away, but he was able to get such a gift. If this matter were to spread, it would make a lot of people jealous. And all of this, it was all thanks to Lin Yi. Without Lin Yi, Qiao Hongkai wouldn't even be able to get 4th place in the trial, let alone hope for the foundation establishment pill. Instead, he would end up with 0 points, which would be a stain of incompetence on his body, and he would never be valued by the sect. Then I won't be polite, thank you, boss Lin Yi." Qiao Hongkai stood up, walked to Lin Yi and kowtowed 3 times. Lin Yi was shocked, quickly helped him up and frowned. "What are you doing? You and I are brothers, do we need this?" The bitter senior brother and Xiao Ran watching this scene were also dumbfounded. In the cultivation world, although it was common to form cliques and recognize a boss, as the saying goes, a man's knees are gold, and any cultivator was in existence above thousands of living creatures. Except for the elders of the sect, they would not easily kneel to others. Even if it was a senior brother like Meng Jueguang who wanted to make a newcomer like Meng Tong kneel to him, it was impossible. That was why Qiao Hong would do this, which was beyond their expectations. Hee, boss Lin Yi, don't be angry, I was just excited and couldn't help it." Qiao Hongkai just realized what he had done, and even he was a little surprised, so he couldn't help but laugh. Lin Yi smiled, but although he said so, he understood in his heart that if Qiao Hongkai didn't really think of himself as a boss, he wouldn't have done such an outrageous thing. "Next time don't kneel so involuntarily, didn't I just give you a foundation establishment pill? Scared me?" Lin Yi laughed and scolded, "I thought you wanted to propose to me." The bitter senior brother and Xiao Ran on the side laughed. Lin Yi's joke dissolved the embarrassment of the person involved, Qiao Hongkai, but he didn't regret kowtowing to Lin Yi at all. Whether it was strength, character, or generosity to his own people, no matter from which aspect, Lin Yi was a rare good boss. Compared to people like Meng Jueguang, he was much more reliable. For a grassroots newcomer like him who didn't have any background, to be able to worship under Lin Yi was already a blessing that he had cultivated for several lifetimes. The 4 people drank a few more cups, and during the meal, Xiao Ran and Qiao Hongkai frequently toasted to Lin Yi. Xiao Ran had an introverted personality, and his gratitude towards Lin Yi wasn't any less than Qiao Hongkai, but he wouldn't express it so obviously, and could only express it through toasting. Lin Yi was also well aware of this, because both of them had a background in the secular world, and their temperaments were quite similar. His relationship with Xiao Ran was even closer than Xiao Hongcai's. After a few cups of wine, everything was understood without words. When drinking with close friends, 1,000 cups were not enough. At their level of strength, ordinary wine couldn't make them drunk. The 4 people were in a good mood today and they drank until late at night, only then did they go their separate ways. This drinking session had imperceptibly pulled the relationship between them closer, and there was a feeling of brotherhood between them, unlike before when they were purely huddling together for warmth. In the end, a relationship that was purely maintained by benefits would break sooner or later, but brothers could be together for a lifetime. Chapter 3690. Today he was going to refine the foundation establishment pill overnight. The process was the same as the last time he refined the foundation establishment pill. After putting the herbs into the cauldron, he just needed to input true qi according to the instructions. Although the effect of the foundation establishment pill was above that of the foundation establishment pill, it was still a 4th grade pill after all, so there was no difference in the refining process. Please wait a moment, Jing Jing is calculating the refining time and temperature curve for Lin Yi Gij. Automatic refining script will be generated. Automatic refining script has been generated. According to the weight in the cauldron, one set of materials will be put into the pill. The estimated refining time is 6 hours and 20 minutes. Please save your true chi in advance. The estimated number of pills produced is 1. Sure enough, there was only 1 pill. Linny couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. He had thought that he could get a few more pills like the last time he refined the foundation establishment pill. However, when he thought about it, he only had 1 set of materials this time. If he could successfully refine 1, he would already be extremely lucky. If he wanted more, he would be too greedy. That would ruin his character. Sitting cross-legged, he adjusted his state a little. After making sure that his essence, chi and spirit were restored to their best state, Lin Yi began to use the art of dragon mastery to inject true chi into the cauldron. After all, he only had 1 set of materials this time. If he failed, he didn't know when he would be able to find another heart-devouring exquisite grass. Therefore, this time, even if he couldn't intervene in the changes in the cauldron, at least he had to make sure that nothing went wrong within the scope of his ability. The night passed uneventfully until the next day, when the sky was bright. Only then did Lin Yi finally let out a long breath and slowly stood up. He looked at the words displayed on the tablet of the cauldron. Lin Yi couldn't help but feel lucky. Congratulations, brother Lin Yi, you have successfully refined 1. The foundation establishment pill was different from the others. It was considered the best among all the 4th grade pills. With just 1 set of materials, he was able to successfully refine 1. Apart from praising the genius Han Jingjing for modifying the godly pesticide cauldron, he could only thank his luck. The refinement this time. Other than the occasional buzzing sound, the entire process was extremely smooth, and there were no unexpected changes. Otherwise, if there were to be frequent accidents like last time when he was refining the foundation breaking pill, Lin Yi would really be scared out of his wits. If he failed in refining the foundation breaking pill, then so be it. At most, he would just waste a few sets of ingredients. However, he did not have any heart-devouring exquisite grass to concoct the foundation-building pill this time. If he failed this time, he would really want to cry but have no tears. All the effort he had put in during the entire trial would be wasted. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. He opened the lid of the tripod. Lin Yi quickly found the golden pill that he had been looking forward to. What was even rarer was that this golden pill actually had a circle of pill halo. Han Jingjing was worthy of being called an alchemy genius. After she modified this divine armament cauldron, she successfully refined it twice after coming to Heaven Stage Island. Moreover, every pill that came out of the furnace was of the highest grade with a pill halo. If this matter was spread out, it would really make other alchemists die of shame and anger. According to the usual practice, if there was no special event like the newcomer trial, Lin Yi would go to the Jade Spirit Hall to report for mining, but these 2 days he could go or not. After all, 2 days later was the beginning of the month, and it was the first ranking competition of the entire Welcome Pavilion. In order to let every new disciple be ready, fully digest the trial results, and in order to play the best strength in the ranking competition, the Welcome Pavilion had a relevant agreement with the Jade Spirit Hall, allowing the new disciples to be absent temporarily. This was perfect for Lin Yi, who had just successfully refined the foundation-building pill. He needed time to digest this foundation-building pill. It was better to be early than late. No matter how good the pill was, it would only be effective after taking it. In addition, the foundation-building pill was not the kind of pill that had strong side effects, so Lin Yi did not need to worry too much. As long as he had time, he could take it as soon as possible. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yi slowly put the freshly refined foundation-building pill into his mouth, and then calmed his mind and concentrated, mobilizing his whole body's true chi to begin digesting the foundation-building pill. The foundation-building pill was extremely bitter when it entered the mouth. Perhaps it was because of its main medicinal ingredient, the heart-devouring exquisite grass. After taking it, it gave birth to bursts of heart-wrenching pain. If it was an ordinary person, perhaps they would directly faint from the pain. And even for a master in the early stage of foundation establishment like Lin Yi, with his true chi protecting his whole body's tendons and meridians, the process was extremely long and painful. He could not help but curse in his heart. If this foundation-building pill was not personally refined by me, I'm afraid I would have treated it as poison and forced it out of my body. This medicinal effect is too fucking torturous. The heart-wrenching pain persisted for the time it took for an incense stick to burn, causing Lin Yi to sweat profusely. Finally, it gradually weakened. And just when Lin Yi thought he could relax, his body suddenly shook. This kind of feeling was as if a true chi bomb had exploded in his body. Then he felt an inexhaustible and majestic medicinal effect was instantly released, spreading to every part of his body. It was constantly transformed into extremely pure true qi, merging into every part of his tendons and meridians. Lin Yi originally thought that as a master in the early stage of foundation establishment, the true qi in his body was already very robust. But only now did he realize that he was really looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. Because under the medicinal effect of the foundation building pill, in the short span of a few breaths, the true qi in his body had already soared to more than double. Even now it was still rising. No wonder it could not be found in the market square. It was only at this moment that Lin Yi truly realized the value of the foundation building pill. This pill was enough to match tens of years of bitter cultivation for an ordinary early-stage foundation establishment expert. Even if it was Lin Yi himself who had the jade pendant space, he was afraid that he would need at least several years of bitter cultivation in order to achieve this effect. In contrast, the foundation building barrier breaking pill, which was also a grade 4 medicinal pill, did not have this kind of terrifying effect of 10 years of cultivation. In the market square, one could buy a foundation building barrier breaking pill for 400 spirit jades. But the foundation building pill was simply a priceless item. Let alone 400 spirit jades, even if one was willing to pay 10 times the amount of spirit jades, one still might not be able to buy it. After the true qi in his body soared for a moment, Lin Yi very quickly touched the barrier that his bitter senior martial brother had once mentioned to him. He could clearly feel that the medicinal effect of the foundation building pill had not yet fully manifested. Chapter 3691. If he wanted to go a step further, there was only one way, and that was to change to a bigger bottle. Before changing to a bigger bottle, no matter how much medicinal effect there was, it would only be wasted. After a long time, the excess medicinal effect would disappear without a trace. Normally speaking, the foundation building pill not only had the effect of an experience pill, but it also had the effect of a foundation building barrier breaking pill, which was enough to break that layer of barrier. But at this moment, Lin Yi was very clear that this foundation building pill had already used up too much medicinal effect, and the remaining medicinal effect was not enough to break the barrier. If this continued, he was afraid that the excess medicinal effect would be completely wasted. Lin Yi's heart moved, and he immediately took out a foundation building barrier breaking pill that he had refined last time, and without saying anything further, he took out a foundation building barrier breaking pill. After a moment, the medicinal effect of the foundation building barrier breaking pill took effect. Compared to the previous heart-wrenching pain of the foundation building barrier breaking pill, its symptoms were much milder. Lin Yi did not feel anything and directly felt its effect. It was unknown where it came from, but within Lin Yi's body, there was suddenly a huge force, incomparably tyrannical impact on each and every one of his tendons. Wherever the force passed, regardless of whether the tendons were big or small, they all visibly swelled up. At the same time, the barrier that he had touched before also began to slowly melt. I broke through the barrier just like that? This process was so smooth that even Lin Yi himself found it hard to believe. But at this moment, the majestic true qi within his body continued to rapidly rise, clearly indicating that the barrier had indeed been broken by the foundation building barrier breaking pill. After breaking through the barrier, Lin Yi could clearly feel it. Whether it was the degree of purity or the degree of strength, the true qi within his body had clearly soared compared to before. And at this time, the true qi within his body continued to rise. Although the intensity was not as fierce as at the beginning, the increase was still very obvious. This was clearly the residual effect of the foundation building pill. This process continued for the time it took for a stick of incense to burn before finally gradually calming down. And at this time, the true qi within Lin Yi's body compared to when he had just broken through the barrier had increased by a third. After feeling the transformation of his body, which was as if he had been reborn, only then did Lin Yi let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had decisively swallowed a foundation building barrier breaking pill. Otherwise, the remaining medicinal effects of the foundation building pill would have been completely wasted. If he had followed the normal pace of cultivation, the extra one-third of true qi in his body would have been equivalent to a year of bitter cultivation. At this time, the ghostly thing beside him suddenly said, "Not bad. You actually reached the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment stage in such a short time. You're pretty awesome. Senior, you flatter me." Although Lin Yi was modest on the surface, he was very happy inwardly. After all, this damn thing used to be an elder of the Spirit Beast clan, a super powerful existence that could be ranked in the entire Heaven Stage Island. Even with Lin Yi's experience, he still praised it. This was extremely rare. Unexpectedly, the ghost said in disdain in the blink of an eye, "What's there to be happy about? You're so weak that you can't even stand a chance in the North Island. You don't even have the qualification to go to the island where we are. Why are you so smug?" After saying that, the ghostly thing fell silent, leaving Lin Yi alone with a bitter smile. This was too much of a blow to him. However, he could understand the painstaking efforts of the ghost. Just as it said. Although the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment stage was a lot stronger than the early stage of the Foundation Establishment stage, it was still a beginning stage in the Heaven Stage Island. There was really nothing to be proud of. There was still a long way to go in the future. However, as a newly advanced master at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment stage, it might not be enough in other places, but at least in this small welcome pavilion, it was more than enough. Because this meant that in terms of strength, Lin Yi was already on par with senior stewards like Meng Jueguang. Even if there was any conflict in the future, he wouldn't have to be afraid of the other's strength. And according to Lin Yi's usual invincibility at the same level, if there was a chance, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill Meng Jueguang. Of course, this didn't mean that his strength would break through to the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment stage. In order to fully display his strength, not only did Lin Yi need time to consolidate his strength, but he also needed to further practice the Raging Fire 8 trigrams palm. Compared to before, even if Lin Yi used the 21st style of the Raging Fire 8 trigrams palm, it wouldn't exhaust all the chi in his body. In fact, with his current state he could use the 21st style twice. And more importantly, he could finally go one step further and start to try to use the 22nd style of the Raging Fire 8 trigrams palm. The 21st style of the Raging Fire 8 trigrams palm could kill a master at the early stage of the Foundation Establishment stage. If it was the 22nd style, which was even more powerful, Lin Yi was completely confident that he could kill a master at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment stage in one move. After continuing to practice in the space of the Jade Pendant for a while, when Lin Yi walked out of the cave, the sky was dark again. However, this time he didn't take the initiative to go out. He felt that someone was touching the restriction of his cave. "It's you? What's the matter?" When Lin Yi saw Li Jingming standing at the door, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Li Jingming's expression was slightly conflicted. After stammering for a while, he seemed to have made up his mind and said, "Brother Lin Yi, I heard that the spiritual jades awarded to the first place in the trial are all of high quality. I wonder if I can exchange one with you?" "You want to exchange spiritual jades with me?" Lin Yi finally understood Li Jingming's intention. He couldn't help but laugh in his heart. Meng Jueguang and his gang really can't wait. The 10 pieces of spiritual jades have just been handed to me and they're already in a hurry to send Li Jingming to make the first move. That's right. Apart from assisting in daily practice, high-grade spiritual jades also have certain benefits for building one's foundation. So I want to keep a few pieces. In any case, Brother Lin Yi, you're already an early-stage foundation establishment expert. You shouldn't have any need for this, right? Li Jingming stared closely at Lin Yi's expression. This time, his main purpose for coming here was naturally not to exchange spiritual jades. Exchanging spiritual jades was just an excuse that Meng Jueguang arranged for him to get close to Lin Yi. Otherwise, if Lin Yi hid in the cave all day and didn't come out, even if he wanted to test him, he wouldn't be able to find out where to start. Lin Yi's expression slightly changed. He pretended to be hesitant and said, "You're right. But even for early-stage foundation establishment experts, high-grade spiritual jades are still very hard to come by," Li Jingming hurriedly said. "The price is negotiable. Like last time, 3 for 1 is also fine." Chapter 3692. Okay. Li Jingming nodded his head. As he followed Lin Yi into the cave, he suddenly asked, "Brother Lin Yi, that foundation building pill of yours shouldn't be of use anymore, right? I wonder if you can sell it to me?" "You still want to buy foundation building pills?" Lin Yi stopped and turned his head to look at him. "Do you have that many spirit jades? The price of foundation building pills isn't low." Lin Yi's words weren't to deceive Li Jingming. The price of foundation building pills was indeed not low. Although the market price wasn't as exaggerated as the foundation breaking pills 400 spirit jades, even the lowest price was over 100 spirit jades. Logically speaking, an ordinary newcomer like Li Jingming wouldn't be able to afford it. Li Jingming stared at every change in Lin Yi's expression, clenched his teeth and said, "I can think of a way. Don't tell me he wants to find Meng Jueguang to get a pile of scrap jades to deceive me?" Lin Yi secretly laughed, then shook his head and said, I'm sorry, I've already given that foundation building pill to someone else. Given it to someone else? Li Jingming was clearly stunned. Foundation building pills were such precious things, yet they were casually given away? Even if they couldn't use it themselves, they could still exchange it for a large amount of spirit jades in the market. How could this kind of thing be casually given away? Could it be that this guy's previous performance in the trial was really just a bluff? Could it be like what Meng Jueguang said, that he wasn't an early-stage foundation building expert at all? Using this kind of perfunctory excuse, he probably wanted to keep it for himself to use. Foundation building pills were only useful for heaven-stage great perfection experts. It was normal for Li Jingming to have this kind of thought. Moreover, from the moment he saw Lin Yi, he had been observing Lin Yi's expression. All the signs combined together. He was already 80% sure that this Lin Yi hadn't reached foundation building yet. But he couldn't just leave like that. This was because Meng Jueguang's request was that he had to see Lin Yi fight with his own eyes no matter what. Otherwise, all other judgments based on appearances would be unreliable. That's right, I gave it to someone else. Lin Yi didn't intend to go into detail. A man's wealth was his own ruin. If he said that it was for Qiao Hongkai, it might cause trouble for Qiao Hongkai. The more Lin Yi said this, the more certain Li Jingming was. This guy definitely wanted to keep it for himself. Otherwise, why would he be so tight-lipped about it? Okay, brother Lin Yi, take out your spiritual jades and let's exchange. Li Jingming urged. Lin Yi nodded and blocked Li Jingming's line of sight. He turned around and took out a piece of spiritual jades from the space in the jade pendant, pretending to take it out from his pocket. However, just as he was about to turn around and exchange with Li Jingming, an icy cold energy suddenly attacked him from behind. He had seen this icy cold energy during the trial. It was Li Jingming's Sky Frost Fist. So that's how it is. Lin Yi finally understood. It turned out that this guy didn't come to exchange spiritual jades with him. He was waiting for an opportunity to sneak attack him. Lin Yi's lips curled into a helpless smile. No wonder this damn thing purposely attacked him. It seemed that after today's breakthrough, he was indeed a little complacent. If it was any other time, how could he not have noticed Li Jingming's scheme? While he was alert, Lin Yi also found it a little funny. This Li Jingming was just a heaven-stage great perfection expert, and he dared to sneak into the cave abode to attack him. Where did his courage and boldness come from? Not to mention that Lin Yi was now a real early-stage foundation establishment expert. Even before he broke through, Li Jingming couldn't easily sneak attack him, let alone now. At this moment, Li Jingming was only 2 steps away from Lin Yi, and Lin Yi's back was facing him. If it was between experts of the same level, this would indeed be a very fatal sneak attack. It was almost impossible to avoid. Unfortunately, Lin Yi was not a heaven-stage great perfection expert of the same level as him, but a peak early-stage foundation establishment expert who was 2 levels higher than him. Facing a peak early-stage foundation establishment expert, even 100 more heaven-stage great perfection experts couldn't sneak attack him. This was an absolute level suppression, and there was no possibility of a successful counterattack. Even Lin Yi couldn't fight so many levels higher than him. With a slight movement of his feet, before Li Jingming's heavenly frost vital qi could touch Lin Yi, the person in front of him had already turned into an afterimage. In the next moment, Lin Yi suddenly appeared behind him and said in an unpredictable tone, "What do you mean by this?" Li Jingming was shocked. Before he could react, he was already pinned to the wall by Lin Yi's foot, causing the cave abode to tremble. Lin Yi didn't use any martial arts in this kick. Under the huge level suppression, even if he relied on pure speed and strength, it was far enough to completely crush Li Jingming. Li Jingming suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Looking at the unfathomable Lin Yi in front of him, his heart instantly sank to the bottom. He couldn't help but curse in his heart, how is this a fucking early-stage foundation establishment expert? This aura is clearly at the same level as Meng Jueguang. This guy is really a peak early-stage foundation establishment expert. When he thought about how he had sneak attacked a peak early-stage foundation establishment expert, Li Jingming felt dizzy. This was like a 3-year-old kid challenging a heavyweight boxing champion. Even if he wanted to die, this was not the way to do it. This time he was really killed by those bastards Meng Jueguang. Looking at Li Jingming's horrified expression, Lin Yi couldn't help but think that he had miscalculated. His original intention was to hide his strength and pretend to be a heaven-stage great completion. However, because he had just broken through, he still couldn't perfectly control every inch of strength. When he was sneak attacked just now, he instinctively revealed the strength of a peak early-stage foundation establishment expert. Although he didn't use any powerful martial arts because he didn't want to kill anyone in his cave abode, with Li Jingming's eyesight, even if it was just a simple punch and kick, it was enough for him to judge his strength. Looking at the trembling Li Jingming, Lin Yi couldn't help but frown slightly. A thought flashed across his mind. Should I kill him to keep him quiet? While it would be troublesome to kill someone in his own cave, Li Jingming was the one who ambushed him first. Even if Lin Yi killed him on the spot, no one would be able to say anything. According to the rules of the cultivation world, no matter what the reason was, breaking into someone else's cave abode was already an unforgivable crime. Even if it was exposed, the mastermind, Meng Jueguang, and the others could only suffer in silence. Chapter 3693. With the disparity in strength between them, once Lin Yi made up his mind to kill him, he would not even have the chance to escape from the cave and call for help. Damn it! How could he die here for no reason? Li Jingming's eyes flickered and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, making him look extremely miserable. As a grassroots newcomer with no background, he quickly sought refuge with Meng Jueguang after joining the Welcome Pavilion. This was a choice he had no choice but to make. Although he was not optimistic about Meng Jueguang's character, at least in front of the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers, he was the thickest and most practical thigh to rely on. In order to achieve the goal he had been suppressing for a long time, he had to quickly increase his strength, and in order to do this he needed a large amount of cultivation resources. As a Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomer, other than seeking refuge with Meng Jueguang, this powerful senior, he had no other choice. In fact, this was indeed the case. After decisively seeking refuge with Meng Jueguang, Li Jingming had indeed tasted a lot of benefits. Whether it was the second cave at the foot of the mountain or the 7th mining area, they were all treatment that the other Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers envied. However, what shocked him, as well as all the Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciples, was that every time they met Lin Yi, things would always develop in an unexpected direction. Or more accurately, it didn't make any sense. But now, Li Jingming finally understood the root of this unscientific situation. As a newcomer who had only entered the Welcome Pavilion for a month, Lin Yi was now an expert at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. He was already on equal footing with a senior like Meng Jueguang. If this thing could still be scientific, then it would be strange. There was no such thing as reaping without sowing in this world. Being a lackey had its benefits, but at the same time, it also had its difficulties. Apart from Meng Tong, he was the first loyal follower of Meng Jueguang. Every time there was a crisis, Li Jingming would naturally become the first choice of cannon fodder. This was something that could not be pushed away. Since they were going to be cannon fodder, they had to have the awareness of being cannon fodder. They might have been lucky to get away with it once or twice, but they couldn't be so lucky every time. Just like now, Li Jingming clearly knew that he had kicked an iron plate. If he didn't make a decision soon, he might just die here. This time, Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong, that bunch of idiots, had really tricked them to death. Lin Yi condescendingly looked down at the battered and exhausted Li Jingming coldly and expressionlessly said, "Since you dared to launch a sneak attack on me, then you should be aware of it, right? I can see that you and Meng Jueguang are not the same kind of people, but it's a pity. If you do something wrong, you have to pay the price." Hearing this, Li Jingming's heart suddenly trembled because he could clearly feel that the other party's killing intent had become stronger. A thought in his mind made his hair stand on end. Lin Yi is serious, he really intends to kill me. Seeing that Lin Yi was about to make a move, Li Jingming knelt down with a bang. He hurriedly said, "Boss Lin Yi, please spare me. I had no choice, it was Meng Jueguang and the rest who forced me to test you." Looking at this scene, Lin Yi couldn't help but raise his eyebrows in surprise. In his previous impression, Li Jingming wasn't this kind of cowardly person. If it was Meng Tong who did this, it would be easier for him to accept it. After all, that guy was obviously someone who bullied the weak and feared the strong. But this Li Jingming, he didn't look like that. "I know they sent you to test me. As for whether or not I had no choice, this is not a reason for me to spare your life, do you understand?" Lin Yi looked at him calmly, his eyes still flashing with killing intent. "I understand. Boss Lin Yi, don't worry, I will definitely not leak a word about you." Li Jingming hurriedly responded and nodded. The reason why Lin Yi wanted to kill him now was actually very simple: he knew too much. Not only did he know that Lin Yi had successfully built his foundation, but he also knew that Lin Yi was already at the peak of the early stage of foundation building. For Lin Yi, who wanted to keep a low profile, this was obviously a huge hidden danger. What's more, Li Jingming, was Meng Jueguang's subordinate. Once this information fell into the hands of Meng Jueguang, Not only would Lin Yi's plan to pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger fail, but it would also cause a lot of unexpected trouble. After all, a grassroots newcomer who had entered the Welcome Pavilion for less than a month had jumped 2 levels to become a peak early stage of foundation building. If this news were to spread, it would definitely cause an extraordinary sensation. At that time, the situation would definitely not be under Lin Yi's control. Lin Yi sneered and looked at him, his tone unpredictable. You should have heard of this saying, only dead people will not reveal secrets. This? Li Jingming's heart suddenly sank. What Lin Yi meant was that he really wanted to kill him to silence him. He saw that the killing intent on Lin Yi's body was getting stronger and stronger. Maybe he would attack the next moment. He was just a heaven stage full circle, in front of a peak early stage of foundation building like Lin Yi. It was impossible for him to have the slightest bit of power to fight back. Once Lin Yi attacked, there would only be one ending for him: death. I'm not willing. I endured for more than 10 years, went through all kinds of hardships to enter the Welcome Pavilion, and finally found a little dawn of revenge. How could I die here for no reason, in the hands of a person who had nothing to do with me? Bang bang bang. Li Jingming suddenly kowtowed to Lin Yi 3 times. The kowtowing made his head bleed and it was too horrible to look at. Lin Yi's eyelids twitched. What was going on these 2 days? Why did everyone just kowtow to him? Qiao Hongkai was like this before, and now Li Jingming was doing it again. Boss Lin Yi, I know you don't believe me, but I still have things I have to do, so I really can't die here. No matter what, please believe me this time. I was forced to rely on Meng Jueguang previously. I really don't want to be an accomplice to a villain. Li Jingming said sincerely with a head full of blood. Things you have to do? Lin Yi sized up Li Jingming with his virtual eyes. His words sounded sincere and it didn't sound like he was lying. And from the few times he had met Li Jingming before, this guy was indeed a little strange. When he was sent to set him up, he even deliberately gave a lot of hints. This meant that at least in his heart he didn't really want to set him up. He did this only because he had to rely on Meng Jueguang and he had no choice. Chapter 3694. Li Jingming knew that if he hesitated any longer, he would be killed in one move. Therefore he could only reveal everything about himself before Lin Yi took action. That way he might still have a chance of survival. That's right. Boss Lin Yi, you're from the secular world, so you probably don't know much about the local affairs on Heaven Stage Island. I wonder if you've heard of the Qiushui Villa massacre 16 years ago? Li Jingming stared at Lin Yi's expression and asked. Lin Yi's expression changed slightly. You mean Qiushui Villa in Qiushui Town on the North Island? I've heard a little about it. When he was chatting with senior brother Ku Bai and the others, they often talked about the local customs and practices of Heaven Stage Island. One of the things that left the deepest impression on him was the massacre of the Qiushui Villa that senior brother Ku Bai mentioned 2 days ago while they were drinking. This incident happened 16 years ago. At that time, Qiushui Town was still one of the few big towns on the island. Among them, Qiushui Villa was the most powerful one. It was said that at its peak, even the higher-ups of the 3 major pavilions had to personally prepare lavish gifts for the old master of Qiushui Villa to celebrate his birthday. At that time, looking at the entire Heaven Stage Island's North Island, apart from the 3 pavilions, Qiushui Villa was undoubtedly one of the top families and forces in the North Island. However, such a colossus in the eyes of countless people had collapsed overnight at its most glorious and glorious time. There were more than 1,500 people in the Qiushui Manor. From the head of the family to the servants, all of them were killed. Not a single person was left alive. The luxurious manor that occupied hundreds of acres of land was also burned to the ground overnight. And this was the legendary Qiushui Villa massacre case that caused a sensation. After the incident, the 3 major pavilions were shocked. In order to investigate the truth and arrest the real culprit, they did not hesitate to send out the top forces of the law enforcement hall. However, after several months of investigation, they found nothing in the end. The case was left unsettled. No one knew who the real culprit was, nor did they know why he had annihilated the entire Qiushui Manor in a single night. As time passed, people would often bring up this shocking tragedy as a topic of conversation, but that was all there was to it. Li Jingming looked at Lin Yi with a burning gaze and said in a choked voice, My name isn't Li Jingming, it's just an alias to deceive others. My real name is Qiu Jiming, and my father was the Qiushui Manor's patriarch, Qiu Jingtang. He was the only survivor among the 1,541 people in the Qiushui Manor. So, the only reason I'm alive is to take revenge. Before that, I absolutely cannot die. Lin Yi was stunned. He really didn't expect that Li Jingming was carrying such a deep blood feud. No wonder he felt an inexplicable sense of heaviness whenever he saw this person. He had thought that it was because he was scheming. Who would have thought that the source of all this was the resentment of 1,540 people? I understand. I deeply sympathize with your tragic experience, but that's all. Lin Yi nodded, but the murderous intent in his eyes didn't diminish. The reason was simple. No matter how deep the blood feud Li Jingming was carrying, what did it have to do with Lin Yi? Was it because the other party had not taken revenge? Was that why he couldn't bear to let him go? Lin Yi, who had fought his way up from the secular world, had seen many sinister people's hearts. He wouldn't be so easily soft-hearted. In the world of cultivation, where the strong preyed on the weak. When one's life was in the hands of others, it was obviously impossible to rely on sympathy to survive. At the very least, one had to show the value of living. This was an obvious truth that Lin Yi understood, and so did Li Jingming. Boss Lin Yi, I'm not telling you this to gain sympathy. I'm just telling you the reason why I must live. Li Jingming's expression became calm again. He paused and said, if you let me live today, I can serve you from now on. I'll go through fire and water for you without any second thoughts. I can even be your spy and monitor every move of Meng Jueguang's group. This is the biggest bargaining chip I can think of. If Boss Lin Yi still doesn't believe me, then I have nothing else to say. Spy for me? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and pinched his chin. I can consider that. According to his plan, even though he was now at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, he still had to hide in the welcoming pavilion to cultivate and increase his strength for a period of time. His biggest problem in the welcoming pavilion was Meng Jueguang's group. Although with his current strength, Meng Jueguang's group would find it difficult to do anything to him, if they secretly thought of a bunch of dirty tricks, it would be more or less troublesome for Lin Yi. On the other hand, if he could plant a mole in this group of people, then everything would be different. Once any so-called dirty tricks were seen through in advance, the effects would definitely be greatly reduced. If it was used well, it might even achieve the opposite effect and gain benefits from it. Li Jingming's suggestion just happened to scratch Lin Yi's itch. Looking at Meng Jueguang's group, a guy like Meng Tong obviously couldn't be bribed or controlled, and the other newcomers' positions were too marginal. Most of the time, they might not be able to see through Meng Jueguang's plans. In comparison, Li Jingming was the most suitable candidate to be a spy. Seeing that Lin Yi was moved, Li Jingming was instantly overjoyed. He hurriedly struck while the iron was hot and said, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open but hard to guard against a stab in the dark. Boss Lin Yi, although your strength is strong and you don't fear any of their challenges, what if Meng Jueguang plays dirty tricks on you? After all, as a senior steward, he has much more information than you and I. If you can't see through it in advance, you might be able to avoid it once or twice, but there will always be a time when you are careless, right? Lin Yi glanced at him and said, that's right, but why should I believe you? Since you can betray Meng Jueguang, you can turn around and betray me, right? Li Jingming had already expected that Lin Yi would have this concern, so he immediately took out a jade token and handed it to Lin Yi, saying, this is the identity token of my Qiushui manor. My identity information is engraved on it. Other than the late jade carving master of Qiushui Manor, no one else in the world can copy it. This is my biggest secret. Once this identity token is exposed, I will definitely die without a burial place. Lin Yi took the identity token and carefully observed it. It was made of high-quality spiritual jade. Not only was its exterior carved into the shape of a manor, but what was even more bizarre was that inside the spiritual jade, there were dozens of tiny words that were almost undetectable. They were a group of 8 birth characters, and the first row was carved with Li Jingming's original name, Qiu Jiming. Chapter 3695. This identity card can at most prove that you are a survivor of Qiushui Villa. Why would you die once it is exposed? Lin Yi asked doubtfully. Li Jingming laughed bitterly. Boss Lin Yi, you should know that this case alerted the entire law enforcement hall's strongest lineup back then, but it ended without a conclusion. With the law enforcement hall's ability, do you really think that they can't find the mastermind behind such a big case? Continue, Lin Yi said calmly. When he heard senior brother Kubai talk about it, he also had the same doubts. It was impossible for there to be no clues left behind to exterminate the entire Qiushui Villa of 1,540 people. If the law enforcement hall really wanted to investigate, it shouldn't be difficult to find the real culprit. However, in the end, the investigation ended without a conclusion after a few months. This kind of ending was really thought-provoking. It's not that they couldn't investigate, but they didn't dare to. That's because the biggest mastermind behind the scenes is the top boss of the Elders Guild of the Three Great Pavilions. Li Jingming gritted his teeth and looked at Lin Yi. Boss Lin Yi, you must be wondering why I chose a pseudonym with the surname Li, right? The reason is very simple. It's because the biggest mastermind behind the scenes is surnamed Li. I want to use this pseudonym to constantly remind myself that I carry the blood feud of 1,540 people on my back. Lin Yi finally understood. If that was the case, once Li Jingming's identity card was exposed, he would really die a horrible death. That was because the big boss of the Elders Guild with the surname Li would definitely not allow a fish like Li Jingming to escape the net and roam freely outside. In other words, if all of this was true, Li Jingming handing over the identity card meant that his life was in the hands of Lin Yi. If he had any ulterior motives, Lin Yi could kill him at any time. Even if he had people like Meng Jueguang to protect him, it would be useless. Okay, I believe you. Lin Yi finally nodded. If he still remained indifferent after Li Jingming said this, it would be a little too much. Unless he didn't want Li Jingming to be his mole from the start. But the reality was that he needed Li Jingming to be his mole. Li Jingming also showed enough sincerity. Now that things had developed to this point, the two of them naturally hit it off. Li Jingming couldn't help but be overjoyed, but before he could feel the joy of surviving a disaster, Lin Yi casually threw the identity card back to him. He couldn't help but shiver. Boss Lin Yi, what is the meaning of this? Lin Yi smiled, not minding it. Since I already believe that you're loyal to me, I'm willing to help you. Since I already believe that you sincerely want to rely on me, then I don't need this kind of cumbersome thing. After all, if you really want to betray me in the future, then even if I have this identity card, it would be meaningless. This was the truth. Although this identity card was a fatal threat to Li Jingming, if he really thought of a way, it was still possible to get rid of this identity card's restriction. But even so, this action of Lin Yi still made Li Jingming feel flattered. He hurriedly expressed his loyalty. Thank you for Boss Lin Yi's trust. I, Li Jingming, swear to the heavens that no matter what happens in the future, I won't dare to have the slightest bit of disloyalty. If I violate this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy me. I don't believe in oaths. I only believe in my own strength. I'll say the ugly words first. In the future, if you have any disloyalty, I can easily take your life. When that time comes, no one can save you. Do you understand? As he spoke, Lin Yi's imposing manner as a peak early-stage foundation establishment expert was completely released. The entire cave trembled slightly. Li Jingming hurriedly prostrated on the ground. I understand. Okay, you can get up. Lin Yi nodded lightly. Yes. Li Jingming immediately got up nimbly. Although his injuries weren't light, Lin Yi didn't use any martial arts when he beat him. At this time he couldn't even stand up. Lin Yi thought for a while and ordered, when you go back later, report to Meng Jueguang that I'm now in the early stage of foundation establishment. Do you understand what I mean? Li Jingming was stunned. He thought about the key points in his mind and quickly understood Lin Yi's meaning. He nodded. I understand. If he went back this time and reported to Meng Jueguang that Lin Yi was still in heaven stage great perfection and hadn't succeeded in foundation establishment, although this was the best way to hide his strength in the short term, it would be easy to expose flaws in the following ranking competition. Instead, it was better to reveal a little bit of Lin Yi's strength to Meng Jueguang in advance. This way he wouldn't reveal Lin Yi's trump card. At the same time he could also gain people's trust. Only then could he work as an inside man for a long time. Boss Lin Yi, I'll leave first. Li Jingming glanced at Lin Yi. He had already been in the cave for a while. If he stayed here for too long, it would be easy to arouse suspicion. Wait a minute. Lin Yi suddenly stopped him and handed over a piece of spiritual jade. Didn't you say you wanted to exchange spiritual jades with me? After all, you came in with this excuse. If you go back empty-handed, Meng Jueguang and the others will still have to question you, right? This? Li Jingming couldn't help but be a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a long time, he stammered, Boss Lin Yi, there's something I have to tell you. You must be mentally prepared. You must hold on later. Lin Yi saw his expression and already guessed what he was going to say. He couldn't help but laugh. All right, just say it. That before, didn't a lot of people come to exchange spiritual jades with you? In fact, Meng Jueguang gave us a pile of waste jades and asked us to use them to cheat you of your good jades. In other words, you used a dozen good jades to exchange for a pile of worthless waste jades. You were cheated by Meng Jueguang? Li Jingming said awkwardly. In fact, he had always been very puzzled about this matter. In his opinion, with Lin Yi's shrewdness, how could he not be able to distinguish good jades and waste jades? Moreover, he was cheated by these people using the same excuse again and again. Even when he deliberately exposed a few flaws, Lin Yi still didn't have the slightest reaction. Lin Yi chuckled and said, I know. I knew this was a scam from the beginning. Then why did you? Li Jingming was dumbfounded. How could there be someone who knew that it was a scam, but still cooperated and fell for it? Lin Yi smiled faintly. I have a special use for collecting waste jades. In comparison, I don't rely much on good jades. So I'm happy to cooperate with you. I can't wait for you to give me more waste jades. Chapter 3696. Lin Yi smiled but didn't say anything. He didn't intend to explain in detail. After all, Li Jingming hadn't been with them for long. It was better to keep this kind of thing a little mysterious. After exchanging 3 pieces of useless jade with Lin Yi for a piece of good jade, Li Jingming turned around and left. Lin Yi's voice came from behind. If Meng Jueguang finds anything unusual, tell me in advance. It's okay even if you can't be a mole. I'll cover for you. I won't let you suffer any losses. Okay. Li Jingming's heart warmed and he nodded heavily. The moment he stepped out of Lin Yi's cave, he suddenly felt that even though today's trip was extremely dangerous, it was very meaningful. It was even enough to change the course of his life. Although he had no choice but to rely on Lin Yi, it was also a kind of release for him, who had suffered under Meng Jueguang. After all, no matter how he looked at it, Boss Lin Yi was much more reliable than a wretched small fry like Meng Jueguang. From today onwards, I, Li Jingming, am also on Lin Yi's side. Looking at Li Jingming's back view as he left, Lin Yi pinched his chin thoughtfully. Even he didn't expect things to develop to this stage so suddenly. If Li Jingming hadn't offered to be a mole, there might have been another corpse in the cave. Li Jingming was forced to surrender. Although he took the initiative to reveal his biggest secret in order to give others a handle, he didn't go into details. For example, why Qiushui Villa was destroyed and why he, the son of the important family leader, was able to escape. Also, why did he carry his identity token with him if it was a fatal weakness? If Lin Yi really wanted to dig deeper, he could probably dig out many secrets from Li Jingming. It might even involve the big secret of Qiushui Villa. After all, it was something that the elders would not hesitate to go to war for. Once the reason was dug out, it would definitely be a big deal. However, just like how Lin Yi didn't want to reveal his secrets to others, it was understandable that Li Jingming didn't say anything about his family's secrets. In the end, Lin Yi didn't care how big of a secret Li Jingming was hiding. As long as Li Jingming didn't betray him and did his job as a mole, that was enough. If Li Jingming really did betray him, it would be like what he said just now. With his strength, it would be easy for him to take Li Jingming's life. He didn't need to hold anything against him at all. Lin Yi believed that Li Jingming wouldn't betray him, at least not in a short period of time. It wasn't wishful thinking that he believed Li Jingming's so-called loyalty. In the cultivation world that was full of deceit, as long as the temptation was big enough, anyone could throw away their principles at any time. Li Jingming was no exception. The reason why Lin Yi was so sure was that he believed that Li Jingming was rational and smart enough. Any smart guy would always be able to recognize the reality and know what was the best choice for him. After leaving Lin Yi's cave abode, Li Jingming was immediately called away by the people who had been waiting there. However, he wasn't called to Meng Tong's cave abode number 15 at the foot of the mountain, but to Meng Jueguang's cave abode on the opposite mountain. As soon as he stepped into the cave abode, Li Jingming couldn't help but be stunned when he saw the familiar faces inside. It wasn't just Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong who were waiting here. There were also Kang Mingming and Zhong Pingliang from Soaring Pavilion. What surprised him the most was that even Su Lingchong, young Master Su, was actually among them. Li Jingming couldn't help but smile secretly. This lineup was simply the most obvious anti-Lin Yi alliance of Yingxin Pavilion. Seeing Li Jingming coming in and seeing his bloody and embarrassing appearance, everyone waiting here was shocked. Wasn't it just to test Lin Yi's strength? It wasn't like he was going to fight to the death with Lin Yi. Was there a need to be so horrifying? Fuck. Lin Yi beat the shit out of you. Why are you so stupid? It's just a test. Do you have to fight to the death with him? Don't you know how to use your brain? Meng Tong cried out in surprise. He was gloating, but in his heart he was glad. If he hadn't been quick-witted and pushed the task to Li Jingming, he would be the one in this miserable state now. I'm so fucking quick-witted. Li Jingming rolled his eyes helplessly. If he didn't rely on Lin Yi, he would probably be pissed off by Meng Tong now. He actually chose this kind of trash as a teammate. Now that he thought about it, he must have been blind. Shut the fuck up. Meng Jueguang glared at Meng Tong. If he allowed this guy to continue making sarcastic remarks, it would probably chill Li Jingming's heart. In the future, Li Jingming wouldn't work so hard for him anymore. Turning his head, Meng Jueguang pretended to be gentle and said, "How is it? What is Lin Yi's strength now?" Li Jingming was speechless again. If it was any other normal person, the first thing they would ask at this time would be whether his injury was serious or not. But this fucking Meng Jueguang didn't care about his life at all. He didn't even mention the promised reward of a piece of spiritual jade. At the end of the day, Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong were both cold-hearted people. Now that he thought about it, his decision to rely on Lin Yi was simply the wisest decision he made since he entered the welcome pavilion. After slightly adjusting his breathing, Li Jingming replied, "Senior Meng, that Lin Yi has indeed succeeded in building his foundation. He is now an expert in the early stage of building his foundation. I'm no match for him at all. If it wasn't for him being afraid of causing a scene that would get out of hand, I'm afraid I would have been killed by him in one move just now." What? That guy has really succeeded in building his foundation? Are you sure you didn't see wrongly? Meng Jueguang was shocked. Even Su Lingchong and the others found it hard to believe. Even if Lin Yi was really a cultivation genius, it was impossible for him to have a deep foundation in the secular world where the spiritual energy was thin. Moreover, he had only been in the welcome pavilion for less than a month. During this time, he didn't get many decent cultivation resources. Even his cave was the extremely rotten number 14 cave at the foot of the mountain. The only good jade he had on hand had already been swindled away by them with useless jade. How could he have succeeded in building his foundation in a month? Isn't this a little too exaggerated? If he remembered correctly, this had already broken the Welcome Pavilion's foundation building record for the past few hundred years. Chapter 3697. What's so strange about that? Wasn't I defeated by him in one move? If Lin Yi was really a foundation establishment early stage expert, trash like you should have been killed in one move. How could you come back alive? Meng Tong muttered in his heart, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. After all, this matter was too embarrassing. How could he take the initiative to expose his own scars? But if that's the case, why didn't he be ruthless to you guys during the trial? And the aura that he usually exudes is obviously only at the Heaven Stage Great Circle? Meng Jueguang still had some doubts. Instinctively, he didn't want to believe that this was the truth. Li Jingming was slightly surprised. Making these people believe that Lin Yi was now a foundation establishment early stage expert was the first order that Lin Yi gave him. As a spy who had just defected, this first mission definitely couldn't be messed up. Maybe he was just like Senior Meng guessed at that time, and he wasn't a foundation establishment early stage expert? Li Jingming thought about it and said, "What do you mean?" Meng Jueguang and the others couldn't help but be stunned. Because when I tested him just now, I felt that although he was already a foundation establishment early stage expert, his aura wasn't stable. It looked like he had just broken through not long ago. So I guess that he might have taken the trial reward foundation establishment pill, so he just broke through. Li Jingming deliberately misled. Although Lin Yi said that he had already given the foundation establishment pill to someone else, Meng Jueguang and the others didn't know. This excuse sounded reasonable. That's right. Your conjecture is logical. Meng Jueguang clapped his hands and said, "For a Heaven Stage Great Circle expert, although the foundation establishment pill can't guarantee a 100% success rate, it can greatly increase the success rate. In that case, this fellow Lin Yi really got lucky. After taking the foundation establishment pill, he accidentally succeeded in building his foundation." Hearing him say that, Su Lingchong and the others came to a realization. The foundation establishment pill was a very precious thing to any Heaven Stage Great Perfection expert. For the sake of stability, the vast majority of people would first save up foundation building pills even if they obtained them. They would do their best to raise their strength to the limit where they could not break through, and only then would they take them. Only then would they be able to maximize their chances of successfully building their foundation. However, there were also some courageous people who, after obtaining the foundation building pill, would impatiently consume it. Although their success rate would be far inferior to the first group of people, they would still have a certain chance of successfully reaching foundation building. From Meng Jueguang's perspective, Lin Yi was obviously the second kind of person who had gotten lucky. For everyone present, compared to Lin Yi, this guy relied on his own strength to build the foundation. Obviously, the latter speculation was more convincing. Did he really think that he could reach the foundation establishment stage by relying on his own strength? How could Lin Yi, a country bumpkin from the secular world, do something that even young Master Su like Su Lingchong couldn't do? Bullshit. But, no matter what, we can already confirm that Lin Yi is already an early-stage foundation building expert. Ninth cousin, then what should I do? The ranking competition is in another day. Meng Tong couldn't help but say anxiously. Although Lin Yi's success in building his foundation was not good news to Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang, it wasn't a direct threat. However, Meng Tong was different. Not only was he the biggest competitor among the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers with Lin Yi, he was also defeated by Lin Yi in one move on the first day. He still had an arranged match with Lin Yi in the ranking competition. Although he obtained second place in the trial and also held a foundation establishment pill in his hand, he didn't dare to rashly consume it. Otherwise, if he failed to break through to foundation building this time, not only would he waste the precious foundation establishment pill. Moreover, because of the side effects of the foundation establishment pill, it would also cause the difficulty of breaking through to foundation building the next time. If that happened, he, Meng Tong, might not have the chance to break through to foundation building in this lifetime. If that happened, he would really not be able to find a grave even if he cried. It's all your own fault for being useless. You clearly had a foundation establishment pill, but you didn't dare to eat it. Now that Lin Yi took the initiative. Meng Jueguang glared at him unhappily, but he also understood Meng Tong's concerns. After all, if he was in Meng Tong's position, he also wouldn't dare to easily consume it. But ninth cousin, didn't you also say that in my current state the success rate of taking the foundation establishment pill is less than 30%? How could I dare to eat it? Meng Tong said with a sullen face. Adding the foundation establishment pill, the success rate was less than 30%. This really couldn't be blamed on him being timid. Otherwise, with his personality of being in the limelight, it would be strange if he didn't have the chance to break the Welcome Pavilion's foundation establishment record and even leave his name in the history books. But then again, even if there wasn't a special case like Lin Yi this year, the newcomers would still be able to break the Welcome Pavilion's foundation establishment record. The reason was simple. In the past, people like Zhang Liju didn't have such a ridiculous reward like the foundation establishment pill. Other than the cave and spirit jade, they could only rely on their own hard work. If they wanted to foundation establishment, they could only rely on their own talent and hard work. And in recent years, because of Zhang Liju's intentional care, the resources of the 3 pavilions on the North Island were more than doubled. And because of this, the reward like the foundation establishment pill fell into the hands of the newcomers. Otherwise, even if the newcomers had the chance to get the foundation establishment pill, they would have to wait until the last month. How could there be such a good treatment like the foundation establishment pill in the first month? At the end of the day, they were able to get the foundation establishment pill so quickly because of Zhang Liju, the previous foundation establishment record holder. However, in the past, when they didn't have the foundation establishment pill, they could only look at it and sigh. Now that they had the foundation establishment pill, they had to worry about when to use it. Meng Tong's words were exactly what Kang Mingming and Zhong Pingliang were worried about. Don't forget that they each had a foundation establishment pill in their hands, but because of the same concerns as Meng Tong, they didn't dare to use it. Originally, if everyone was only sky perfection, it wouldn't matter much if they saved up the foundation establishment pill, but now that there was a precedent like Lin Yi, the pressure was instantly on their heads. One had to know that the ranking competition was very different from the newcomers' test. This time, the newcomers of the 3 pavilions were going to do it together. If they were still sky perfection and they had to face Lin Yi, who was at the early phase of foundation establishment, then the situation wouldn't be optimistic. Chapter 3698. For a moment, the whole place was dead silent. Even a young master like Su Lingchong was helpless when faced with Lin Yi, who suddenly became a foundation establishment realm master. Kang Mingming hesitated for a moment and suddenly said, "Master Su, I heard that there's a type of foundation establishment elixir that can greatly increase the success rate of foundation establishment?" Su Lingchong looked at him and nodded, "That's right. If you take the foundation establishment elixir in your current state, the success rate is only 30%. But if it's combined with the foundation establishment elixir, the success rate will be at least 70%. If it's a supreme grade foundation establishment elixir, the success rate can even reach 90%. However, this elixir has a short shelf life. Once it's made, it must be consumed within a day. That's why it's hard to find in the market. Most of the time you can't buy it even if you want to. You have to go through special channels." Kang Mingming and the others looked at each other, their eyes burning with passion. A 30% success rate wasn't enough, but if it was above 70%, it would be much more reliable. Moreover, if it was a supreme grade foundation establishment elixir, the success rate could reach 90%. Then, with Master Su's background and connections, it shouldn't be hard to get this elixir, right? Kang Ming Ming said carefully, Master Su, you know that we have a huge grudge against Lin Yi. If we don't do anything these 2 days, we might embarrass you in the ranking competition when we face Lin Yi, who is at the early stage of foundation establishment realm. Su Lingchong thought for a moment and looked at the hopeful Kang Ming Ming and the others. How about this? I'll make a trip to the alchemy hall tomorrow and ask them for some foundation establishment elixir with my name. Thank you, Master Su. Kang Ming Ming was overjoyed. Zhong Pingliang and Meng Tong also thanked him profusely. Su Lingchong glanced at Meng Tong. Foundation establishment elixir wasn't a common item. Originally he only wanted to give it to Kang Ming Ming and Zhong Pingliang. After all, these two people were his direct subordinates and Meng Tong was at most an outsider. How could he be qualified to receive the same treatment as Kang Ming Ming? However, on second thought, his main purpose for appearing here today was to deal with Lin Yi, and Meng Tong could be considered as cannon fodder at the front line. If this guy's strength was too weak, he would be bullied by Lin Yi too much. Let's just treat it as letting him off easy this time. After all, it's just a small matter in passing. Li Jingming watched all of this with the cold eyes of a bystander. In his heart he thought that Meng Tong was really lucky this time. However, he was not envious of this kind of luck. His priority now was to keep a low profile. If he succeeded in building his foundation too early, it would be easy to attract attention. On the contrary, it was not a good thing. What's more, he came from a prestigious family. As long as he had enough time, it wouldn't be difficult for him to succeed in building his foundation with his own strength. Compared to these people in front of him who took the foundation establishment elixir, although it looked enviable. Compared to the foundation establishment masters who relied on their own strength to break through, there was a natural gap in strength. It was not the best choice. However, if Su Lingchong really got them the foundation establishment elixir, then he had to inform Boss Lin Yi in advance. Otherwise, even if Boss Lin Yi was already a master at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, he would suddenly encounter these 3 early-stage foundation establishment masters like Kang Ming Ming. He was afraid that he would still be caught unprepared. What Li Jingming didn't know was that even if he didn't inform Lin Yi would still be able to receive the news in advance. After all, other than him, Lin Yi still had Zhong Pingliang, the spy he had planted long ago. After being praised by Kang Ming Ming and the others, Su Lingchong changed the topic. Actually, to this young master, it doesn't matter what the strength of that kid Lin Yi is. Even if he's a master at the early stage of foundation establishment, in this young master's eyes, he's still just an insignificant ant. However, in this trial I discovered a very bad sign. This kid who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth has already started to touch my bottom line. What sign? Meng Jueguang and the others all pricked up their ears. Su Lingchong glanced at them. Haven't you guys realized that since who knows when this kid has actually started to form a relationship with little junior sister Shangguan Laner? Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong heard this and immediately looked at each other. The two of them had the most say in this matter. For Lin Yi to be able to get to know Shangguan Laner, the two of them could be considered to have played a huge role. However, they didn't dare to tell this to Su Lingchong. What if this young Master Su took his anger out on them? It was wiser to pretend that they didn't know anything. Su Lingchong's face was gloomy as he continued, I don't need to say more about Shangguan Laner's identity. Although it's normal for a little princess of noble birth like her to be curious about a commoner like Lin Yi, and there's no lack of stories of a fair, rich and beautiful woman falling in love with a poor man, I absolutely won't allow this kind of thing to happen to Shangguan Laner. She's mine. Other than me, no one else can touch her. This was the main reason why he brought people to look for Meng Jueguang today. Otherwise, if it was just to deal with Lin Yi, there was no need for him to show himself. He only needed to let someone pass a message to everyone present. Young Master Su's words are indeed very dangerous. Lin Yi is famous for being a womanizer when he was in the secular world. Take the 7 inheritors who were responsible for transporting us, for example. Every one of them is a great beauty, but every one of them is entangled with Lin Yi. Miss Shangguan is a little girl who doesn't know the ways of the world. Once this guy sets his eyes on her, she'll easily fall into his hands. At that time, if he really becomes the son-in-law of the Shangguan family, it'll be big trouble. Kang Ming Ming added oil to the fire. And with every sentence that Kang Ming Ming said, Su Lingchong's face became more gloomy. When he finished speaking, Su Lingchong's face was already as gloomy as water, and there was even a piercingly cold murderous intention. Before this, although Lin Yi openly went against him, he had always treated Lin Yi as an ant and disdained him. But this time, the matter involved Shanghai Laner, who he had long determined to be his exclusive property, and the nature was completely different. So, we must nip this in the bud. Su Lingchong gritted his teeth and said, we must find a way to make Laner hate Lin Yi. If we can't do this, then we can only take a risk and think of a way to kill Lin Yi. Everyone present shuddered at the same time. This time, young Master Su really had the intention to kill. Young Master Su, although it's easier to kill Lin Yi directly, it's too risky. It's better to think of other ways unless it's absolutely necessary. Zhong Pingliang hurriedly reminded. Chapter 3699. With Su Lingchong's power, if he really wanted to do this, even if Zhong Pingliang had confidence in Lin Yi, he couldn't guarantee that Lin Yi could escape. After all, it was easy for Su Lingchong to mobilize a few masters who were stronger than Lin Yi. Li Jingming, who was standing silently on the side, looked at Zhong Pingliang with some surprise. His worries were the same as Zhong Pingliang's, but with his status, he was not qualified to speak in front of Su Lingchong. He didn't expect Zhong Pingliang to do it for him. At this time, Meng Jueguang also echoed, what Brother Zhong said makes sense. The three pavilions have always attached great importance to newcomers. If a newcomer is killed, it is likely to directly alarm the higher-ups of the law enforcement hall. No matter how clean our hands and feet are, I'm afraid there will be traces left and we will get into trouble. Meng Jueguang's words were actually purely for his own consideration. After all, Su Lingchong said this in front of several people present. If he really wanted to assassinate Lin Yi, Meng Jueguang would definitely not be able to stay out of it. At that time, the law enforcement hall might not touch Su Lingchong, but he would definitely be thrown out as a scapegoat, and then he would die without a burial place. Don't worry, I won't do this unless I have no other choice. So, all of you think carefully about how to make little sister Laner hate Lin Yi. Su Lingchong glanced at these people and said, although he had a strong background, assassinating a newcomer was not only a person's life, but also related to the image of the three pavilions in the north. If it really reached that point, even if his grandfather wanted to protect him, he was afraid that he would have to spend a lot of effort. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Master Su, would not do such a stupid thing. Everyone frowned and thought hard for a while, and the most shrewd Meng Jueguang suddenly clapped and said, I got it. I thought of a good way. Speak quickly. Su Lingchong hurriedly urged. Shangguan Laner was the official wife candidate he had planned for a long time. Although he hadn't gotten her yet, how could he tolerate being in a relationship with such a shady person like Lin Yi? He must nip this in the bud as soon as possible. Young Master Su, you just said that a noble princess like Miss Shangguan would be interested in a commoner like Lin Yi. It's because she has never come into contact with such a person, so she's curious, right? Meng Jueguang deliberately kept her in suspense. Yes, go on. Su Lingchong nodded. As the saying goes, once a woman's curiosity is piqued, she will not be far from falling. Young Master Su, even a tall, rich and handsome man like you could completely crush a poor man like Lin Yi, but a woman's curiosity was the key to the success of a poor man's counterattack. So, if we want to nip this danger in the bud, the key is to eliminate Miss Shangguan's curiosity. Meng Jueguang pretended to be profound. Su Lingchong said thoughtfully, that's a little interesting. Then how do you think we can eliminate her curiosity? We can't just throw her into the commoner world, right? There's no need to go to the commoner world. If we want to eliminate Miss Shangguan's curiosity, it's actually very simple. We just need to let her see the true ugly side of this poor man Lin Yi. Didn't junior brother Kong say that this guy was womanizing everywhere in the commoner world? We just need to let him expose his ugly side in front of Miss Shangguan, then everything will be solved. Meng Jueguang said with a proud smile. I really didn't expect you to be so good at it, Elder Meng. What a talent. Su Lingchong couldn't help but think highly of Meng Jueguang when he heard this. In his eyes, Meng Jueguang was just a dispensable character. However, after listening to Meng Jueguang's words, he suddenly realized that Meng Jueguang was actually quite smart. After receiving Su Lingchong's praise, Meng Jueguang was instantly elated. He had racked his brains to think of ways to hold on to this thick thigh, and now he had finally received recognition. Then tell me, how should we make Lin Yi reveal his lecherous side in front of junior sister Laner? Su Lingchong continued to ask. Meng Jueguang smiled slyly and immediately told him the idea that he had been brewing in his mind like he was presenting a treasure. Su Lingchong listened. He couldn't help but clap his hands and laugh. This is a brilliant plan. I'll leave this matter to you, Elder Meng. Your Blue Cloud Pavilion's Lu Bianren has already decided to get lost. After this matter is done, I'll inform the higher-ups and let you replace him as the third pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion. Thank you, young Master Su, for your appreciation. Meng Jueguang was immediately overjoyed. The third pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion was a position that he had always dreamed of. The senior brother in charge was only at the bottom, but if he became the third pavilion master, he would be a real high-level figure in the Welcome Pavilion. However, I'll say the ugly words first. You can only do things quickly for me. That's why I'll inform the higher-ups on your behalf. Su Lingchong paused and reminded him, also with your qualifications, although it's not a big problem for you to take over the position of the third pavilion master, your strength at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm is too weak. You need to at least reach the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. If you can't reach this hard threshold, it'll be useless no matter how many people speak for you. Although Lu Bianren's matter is already a foregone conclusion, I'm afraid it'll still be a few months before he's actually kicked out. This period of time should be enough for you to break through. Young Master Su is right. I'll definitely do my best and definitely won't let young Master Su down. Meng Jueguang nodded repeatedly. Although the position of the third pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion did not seem to have much authority and was of little importance, due to the fact that the three great pavilions had always attached great importance to newcomers, anyone who had experience in the Welcome Pavilion would naturally enter the vision of the higher-ups. As long as they did not make any major mistakes, their future development would definitely be boundless. In fact, among the current elders of the three great pavilions, more than half of them had the experience of being the pavilion master and deputy pavilion master. This position was equivalent to an important reserve for the future high-level figures of the three great pavilions. Therefore, the appointment and removal of the Pavilion Master and Deputy Pavilion Master of the Welcome Pavilion had always been extremely cautious. Not only did the elders of the three great pavilions have to unify their opinions, if there was a conflict of opinion, it would even be brought up to the Elders Association for a public discussion. In this process, the connections behind one's back were naturally very important, but at the very least, there was a hard condition, and that was that one's strength must be above the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Otherwise, one's strength couldn't surpass the new stewards under him. Even if one sat in the position of the third pavilion master, how could he convince the masses? After that, they chatted for a while and filled in the gaps, complimenting Meng Jueguang's so-called brilliant plan until it was flawless, and only then did they disperse. What they didn't know was that there were two insiders, Zhong Pingliang and Li Jingming here. No matter how brilliant the plan was, it was bound to be full of loopholes when used on Lin Yi. Chapter 3700. Lin Yi couldn't help but chuckle as he looked at the two reports. These people really had a lot of tricks up their sleeves. They wouldn't rest for even a second. If he hadn't planted these two spies in advance, he would have fallen into their trap. What made Lin Yi happy was that the contents of the two reports were basically the same. This proved that Li Jingming was truly doing this for him, at least for now. If he'd just been trying to bluff his way through, it'd be fake news even if the reports came to him now. Who knew, Li Jingming might have even set up a trap to lure Lin Yi into it. But now that he had the two intelligence reports, he didn't have to worry about it anymore. Pinliang and Li Jingming, without knowing each other, became each other's witnesses, and in the future, they would continue to corroborate each other. Once either of them had ulterior motives, Lin Yi would be able to sense it immediately. This was also why he was willing to accept Li Jingming. With this double insurance, he wasn't afraid of Li Jingming's retaliation at all. When the next day was bright, the cave's restriction was suddenly touched by someone. Lin Yi answered and went out, but he didn't see anyone. He only found a beautifully made letter on the stone slab at the door. The corner of Lin Yi's lips curled into a playful smile. This was exactly as the intel had said, and needless to say, this letter had to be Meng Jueguang's handwriting. Lin Yi knew that Meng Jueguang and the others were definitely watching from afar, so he immediately picked up the letter and turned around to return to his cave. He opened the letter. There were only a few sentences on it. The words were written in beautiful handwriting. If he hadn't known that this was Meng Jueguang's plan, he might have believed that it was a girl's handwriting. Little brother Lin Yi, from the first time I saw you, I couldn't get your figure out of my mind. I want to see you. I have something to say to you. Afternoon, Little Forest. See you there, Shangguan Laner. Lin Yi smiled and shook his head. There was a note on the back of the letter. My grandfather is very strict about the relationship between men and women. Destroy it immediately after seeing it. Hee, this group of people is quite thoughtful. Lin Yi could not help but laugh speechlessly. He believed that at this very moment, a similar letter should have been sent to the hands of Laner and Shangguan Laner, but the content was different. It should have been sent in his name, Lin Yi. Using the excuse that he missed the little curly bear, he invited the little curly bear to meet up in the small forest in the afternoon. And on the back of the letter, there should be a similar note. Once it was done, there would be no evidence. Meng Jueguang's plan was actually very simple. It was to use Lin Yi's name to deceive Shangguan Laner to go to the little forest. At the same time, he would use Shangguan Laner's name to express his love to Lin Yi, create a misunderstanding and let Lin Yi fall into the trap. In his eyes, although Lin Yi looked smart and strong at first glance, but in fact he was only SOSO, especially when it came to the relationship between men and women. Normal people's IQ would drop. Suddenly receiving such a confession letter, and the other party was a little princess with a strong background like Shangguan Laner. If it was anyone else, they would be overjoyed and want to immediately fly to the little forest for a date. They would not pay attention to whether this letter was real or fake. Lin Yi, who was a lecherous person in Kong Mingming's mouth, would not be an exception. And once Lin Yi really went to the little forest with such a happy heart, and when he saw Shangguan Laner in the little forest, if he said something inappropriate he might even take a step further. If they were to take things a step further, things would get out of hand. With the temper of Shangguan Laner, she would definitely break up with Lin Yi when she was angry. It might even alarm her grandfather, Shanghai Tianhua. At that time, even if Lin Yi did not die, he would at least be peeled off a few layers of his skin. So, although this plan seemed simple and childish, it was tailor-made for a lecherous person like Lin Yi. It was absolutely fatal. And the dangerous part was, once this plan succeeded, no matter how strong Lin Yi's strength was, it would be useless because Shangguan Laner did not care about his strength at all. If she was really annoyed, not to mention that Lin Yi was just a master in the early stage of foundation establishment, even if he was at the peak of the late stage of foundation establishment, it would be useless. At that time he would still die without a burial place. However, although this plan was tailor-made for Lin Yi, and Meng Jueguang and others had full confidence that Lin Yi would definitely take the bait, if they wanted to succeed there were still two key points. One was that the letter could not leave any evidence. Otherwise, even if Lin Yi really took the bait and threw the letter out after the accident, it would more or less be a hidden danger. Therefore, Meng Jueguang thought of a way to deliberately leave a note on the back. The other key point was how to trick Shangguan Laner into the grove. One must know that Shangguan Laner was not a lecherous person like Lin Yi who would easily take the bait. She was the little princess of the entire 3 pavilions, the dream goddess of countless young men. Among her suitors there were at least 8 young masters like Su Lingchong if not a dozen. If they confessed their love to her in the name of Lin Yi, not to mention tricking Shangguan Laner, she wouldn't even look at them. Taking 10,000 steps back, the Shangguan family had always been extremely strict. Even if she was really interested in Lin Yi, it was absolutely impossible for her to rashly come out and have a date with Lin Yi in the grove. This was originally a difficult problem that made people feel helpless, but Meng Jueguang suddenly had a bright idea. He bypassed Shangguan Laner herself and started with the little curly bear. This matter became much easier. The little curly bear really liked Lin Yi. This was something that Meng Jueguang and the rest had witnessed with their own eyes. Moreover, Shanghai Laner indulged the little curly bear very much. This was something that the entire 3 pavilions knew. If the letter they wrote fell into the hands of Shanghai Laner, it was equivalent to falling into the hands of the little curly bear. With the little curly bear's closeness to Lin Yi, once it heard that Lin Yi wanted to find it to play in the grove, it wouldn't be able to stop it. At that time, even if Shanghai Laner didn't want to go to the grove, it wouldn't be able to. This Meng Jueguang, if he didn't use these crooked methods all day long, he could still be considered a talent. Lin Yi couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. Meng Jueguang was a person with decent strength. He was also tactful and quick-witted. He also had all kinds of tricks up his sleeves. If he used his mind on the right path, he would be able to become a pillar of Blue Cloud Pavilion in the future. Unfortunately, this guy never thought of walking the right path. Chapter 3701. Grove. Although a very general and vague name in the 3 major pavilions, it referred to a fixed grove, located between the Welcoming Pavilion and the Spirit Jade Hall. Grass, trees, water, and stones were all available, and the scenery could be said to be fresh and elegant, and it had been specially repaired. It was a good place to go. Stepping on the gravel road in a circle around the grove, Lin Yi finally saw Shanghai Laner and the little curly bear, the master and pet, in a pavilion. Woo woo. Seeing Lin Yi appear, the little curly bear immediately pounced over. As the owner, Shanghai Laner could not hold it back, and could only stand at the side sulking. Watching Lin Yi and the little curly bear play for a while, Shanghai Laner pouted and asked, "Hey, what magic did you use on Little White, making it so small?" This question was what she wanted to ask the last time in the back mountain hall, but because Lin Yi and Meng Tong were fighting for first place, she was interrupted. "Hee hee, you should ask this little guy this question," Mississippi Lin Yi smiled faintly. "You think I didn't ask it? This guy only knows how to live off me while secretly helping others. After being bewitched a little, it doesn't know what's going on. I've spoiled it for so many years, in the end it's not as close as you, an outsider." Shanghai Laner glared at the little curly bear and said angrily. Because there were very few female disciples in the 3 major pavilions, the little curly bear was not only her pet, but also her closest playmate since childhood. In the end, Lin Yi, who the little curly bear was closer to, suddenly appeared. This feeling was like being interfered with by a third party, not to mention how depressing it was. Woo 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 woo. The little curly bear rode on Lin Yi's shoulder and barked at Shanghai Laner. "You said that the smell on Lin Yi is very good, so you like to climb on him?" Shangguan Laner rolled her eyes speechlessly. "How dare you say that you're not a traitor? Is the smell of a grown man better than mine?" Whoa. Little curly bear seemed to be arguing with something. Really? Shangguan Laner looked at Lin Yi from head to toe in disbelief. When Lin Yi was confused, she suddenly blinked her eyes and carefully sniffed Lin Yi's body. She whispered, "This smell is really good. I've never smelled it before." Lin Yi was speechless when he heard this. At this moment, this little girl's face was less than a centimeter away from his neck. If he moved even a little, he was afraid that she would directly kiss his neck. Could it be that the women on the heavenly island were all so open-minded? Was it really okay for them to be so close to a stranger that they had only met twice? He felt Shangguan Laner's breath on his neck. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but feel restless. He barely managed to maintain his figure, but at this time little curly bear on his shoulders suddenly swayed. Lin Yi subconsciously wanted to catch it, and then a tragedy happened. Both of them suddenly froze. After being stunned for a long time, Shangguan Laner suddenly screamed. She instantly retreated 2 feet away with a blushing face. She pointed at Lin Yi and stammered, Why did you move for no reason?" Lin Yi spread his hands innocently. "It wasn't me who moved just now, it was this little guy who moved." Shangguan Laner immediately saw little curly bear making a face at her. She suddenly felt helpless. It turned out that this little guy was playing tricks. You are not allowed to say anything about this. Otherwise I will ask my grandpa to lock you up, pull out your tendons, peel off your skin, and throw you into the cauldron to refine pills. Do you understand?" Shangguan Laner was stunned for a moment. She immediately changed her expression and stared fiercely at Lin Yi. This was the first time she had skin contact with a boy since she was young. Moreover, she was the one who took the initiative to kiss Lin Yi. If others knew about this, she would really die of embarrassment. Yes. I will pretend that nothing happened." Lin Yi was very cooperative and nodded repeatedly. His thoughts. But he thought of Chu Mengyao. When he saw Shanghai Laner, he couldn't help but think of that Mississippi, thinking back to the first day he went to Songshan. He also inexplicably had an indirect kiss. But at that time, Miss Chu's reaction was completely different from this Miss Shangguan. Mengyao vomited to death, but Shanghai Laner even threatened him not to say anything. This made Lin Yi couldn't help but be in a trance. Yes. It's like nothing happened." Shanghai Laner quickly responded. She immediately turned her head and glared at the little curly bear. She bared her teeth and said, "I'll deal with you when we get back." The little curly bear, on the other hand, was riding on Lin Yi's head to entertain himself. He didn't pay attention to her at all. Instead, it made Shanghai Laner unbearably angry. Although this miss was a bit tsundere, her temperament was not bad. She didn't lose her innocence and cuteness. Lin Yi looked at the scene of the master and pet quarreling and couldn't help but smile. If Shanghai Laner was really that kind of pampered miss who couldn't bear the slightest grievance, then it would be big trouble just now. If she determined that it was molestation, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was exactly what Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang wanted. In order to avoid the awkwardness, Lin Yi could only continue the previous topic and said, Miss, actually, the reason why the little guy is so close to me is probably related to the first time I saw him, when I healed him. You healed Little White? Shanghai Laner was suddenly shocked, but her focus was not on why Lin Yi could heal the spiritual pet, but she hurriedly asked, has Little White been injured before? Yes, when I first saw him he did suffer a serious injury. I didn't think much about it and healed him. That's why he is so attached to me. Lin Yi nodded and said. The little curly bear whimpered in cooperation on his neck, confirming his theory. Shanghai Laner hurriedly hugged the little curly bear and checked it up and down. After finding that there were no sequelae, she was relieved and said, then why didn't you say it earlier? Tell me quickly which bastard hurt Little White. When she was in the back mountain hall a few days ago, she actually thought about all kinds of strange things when she was looking for the little curly bear. However, because the little curly bear was also confused about the situation that day, it couldn't tell the reason at all, so she could only give up and not delve into it. I don't know about this. Lin Yi shook his head and said. Chapter 3702. Instead of alerting the enemy by saying it now, it was better to bury a question mark in this Missy's heart first, and then burst it out at the critical moment. This way it would have a miraculous effect. Shanghai Laner couldn't help but be a little disappointed. Even Lin Yi and the little curly bear couldn't figure out who the real murderer was. Even if she wanted to stand up for the little curly bear, she didn't know who to vent her anger on. Looking at Lin Yi, Shanghai Laner suddenly raised the corner of her mouth and said, seeing that you have saved Little White before, I have decided to recognize you as my junior brother. Don't call me Missy in the future, call me Little Senior Sister, do you understand? Little Senior Sister? Lin Yi was dumbfounded and looked at Shanghai Laner with a strange expression. Of course I entered the sect earlier than you. According to the rules, shouldn't you call me Little Senior Sister? Shanghai Laner pretended to glare at him fiercely, and then said with a proud face, come little junior brother Lin Yi, call me Little Senior Sister. Damn. This chick really came up with something when she wanted to. Lin Yi was speechless for a while, but Shanghai Laner's logic was not bad, so he could only bite the bullet and said, Little Senior Sister. Shanghai Laner immediately smiled and pretended to be solemn and mature. That's a good boy. If you encounter any trouble in the future, come to me, okay? Little Senior Sister will stand up for you. Lin Yi could only roll his eyes. If a man like him really fell to the point of relying on this chick to protect him, then he really lived for so many years in vain. But it was not good to refute on the surface, so he could only nod his head honestly. But strictly speaking, this Little Senior Sister's background was a mess, and her backing was much stronger than Su Lingchong's. It was really a rare thick thigh and he might really be able to use it in the future. With the little curly bear as a natural bond, the two of them chatted and laughed for a while, and their relationship became much closer. After all, Shengguan Lan Er's identity was special, and she had almost no real friends except for the little curly bear. The others either kept a respectful distance from her, or they had ulterior motives like Su Lingchong and the others. It was utterly impossible for any true friendship to exist between them. But today she found the feeling of a friend in Lin Yi. There was no special intention, no flattery, just a comfortable conversation. Being free and unrestrained, this feeling was really not bad. Naturally, Shanghai Laner's favorable impression of Lin Yi began to soar. As for the initial hostility, it had long disappeared. Lin Yi snickered in his heart. If Meng Jueguang and his gang knew about this situation, they would definitely be killed. Not only did they fail to sow discord, but it also brought the relationship between the two of them closer. This was simply going for wool and coming home shorn. Seeing that the sky was getting dark before they parted, Lin Yi suddenly said, Little Senior Sister, I have a request. Say it. Little Senior Sister, I will definitely help you. Shanghai Laner waved her hand heroically. Lin Yi pondered for a moment and said, in the future, in front of others, can Little Senior Sister deliberately pretend to hate me? What? Shanghai Laner was stunned. If it was someone else, they would be too late to be close to her. Lin Yi smiled faintly, let me keep you in suspense first. When the time comes, I will tell you the whole story. Shanghai Laner was after all a little girl. Seeing Lin Yi's mysterious look, she immediately became interested. All right. Little junior brother is busy. As your little senior sister, I will definitely help you. Thank you, little senior sister. Lin Yi did this naturally to numb Su Lingchong and the others. Otherwise, if this group of people didn't see any results, they would inevitably come up with all kinds of crooked ideas to find trouble with him again and again. Then it would not be peaceful. He still wanted to stop for a period of time and cultivate properly. The key point was that in the information given by Zhong Pingliang and Li Jingming, they both mentioned that Shanghai Laner was Su Lingchong's reverse scale. If he was forced into a corner, it was very likely that he would take the risk and directly send people to assassinate him. That would really be troublesome. Although Lin Yi was now an expert at the peak of the early stage of Foundation establishment and could crush all the newcomers in the Welcome Pavilion, it was still not enough outside. But it was still not enough outside. What if the opponent sent an expert in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm or even stronger? At that time, no matter how careful Lin Yi was, he might die a violent death if he was not careful. Then I'll be leaving first. Shanghai Laner forcefully pulled the little curly bear from Lin Yi's shoulder and left after saying goodbye. Looking at her excited footsteps, she seemed to be in a good mood. But perhaps because she suddenly remembered Lin Yi's request, when she walked out of the small forest, Shanghai Laner suddenly stopped in her tracks and pretended to leave angrily. Her acting was quite decent. This little senior sister was quite pure and cute. Lin Yi looked at the girl's back and couldn't help but smile. However, although he successfully got closer to Shanghai Laner, Lin Yi didn't have the intention to use her to climb up. After all, the main reason he came to Sky Class Island was to find Zhang Liju and heal his 7 inheritor girlfriends, as well as Yu Xiaoka and Armadillo. As for relationships like this, he didn't really care about it anymore. Plus, with Lin Yi's personality, he wouldn't even think of using a girl's feelings to climb up the social ladder to achieve his goals. He definitely wouldn't do such a despicable thing. The news of Shanghai Laner and Lin Yi leaving on bad terms quickly reached Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang's ears. Su Lingchong was overjoyed and Meng Jueguang was even more overjoyed. Obviously, their plan had succeeded. Although this plan was specially made for a pervert like Lin Yi, and Meng Jueguang was 90% sure that Lin Yi would fall for it, but now that it actually succeeded, he was still overjoyed. Don't forget that Su Lingchong had promised him beforehand that as long as this matter was done beautifully, Su Lingchong would step forward and greet the higher-ups on his behalf so that he could replace Lu Bianren's position in the future and become the new 3rd Pavilion Master of the Welcome Pavilion. With Su Lingchong's deep background, as long as he could persuade his grandfather, Su Yuanjing, and let Su Yuanjing, a big shot in the Elders Association, say a few words, then no one would be able to compete with him, Meng Jueguang, for the position of 3rd Pavilion Master of the Welcoming Pavilion. As for Meng Jueguang, the only thing he had to do now was to think of a way to raise his strength to the middle phase of foundation building before Lu Bianren left, and this wasn't a difficult thing for him. Chapter 3703. As long as he had the foundation breaking pill, Meng Jueguang believed that breaking through to the middle stage of the foundation breaking stage would be a matter of course. There would not be any obstacles. At that time, he would be able to take over the position of the 3rd Pavilion Master of the Welcome Pavilion. Not mentioning how smug Meng Jueguang was, after Lin Yi returned to his cave, he entered the space within the Jade Pendant to cultivate and stabilize his strength. The night passed uneventfully. The next morning, all the newcomers gathered in the main hall. Their faces were filled with excitement and nervousness that could not be concealed. This was because from today onwards, after a month of adaptation, they would officially enter the stage. From today onwards, there would only be one theme left in the Welcome Pavilion, and that was competition. According to the rules that had been the same for the past few years, from the 2nd month onwards, the newcomers from the 3 pavilions would begin a cruel and intense ranking competition. Every newcomer around them would become each other's competitors. They would either step on each other or be stepped on by each other. Other than that, there was no third possibility. If you were strong enough, then even if you were the most inconspicuous newcomer from the Blue Cloud Pavilion, you could still challenge the number 1 seeded disciple from the Soaring Sky Pavilion and step on him. Then, you could take all the best cultivation resources for yourself. On the other hand, if your strength was too weak, then even if you were a disciple from the Soaring Sky Pavilion with a strong background, you would only be a stepping stone for others. In the following days in the Welcome Pavilion, you could only endure the worst cultivation resources. From then on, you would never be able to rise again. At the end of the day, the cultivation world had always followed the law of the jungle. Even the relatively gentle Welcome Pavilion would only follow the law of the jungle. There were no exceptions. The only consideration was that there would be some restrictions when competing with each other so that no lives would be lost. That was all. Regarding this, after a month of adaptation, all the newcomers were already mentally prepared. Whether it was the strong or the weak, they already knew what they would face. However, when the pavilion master, Hu Yunfeng, went on stage and said his first sentence, the entire audience was in an uproar. In response to the elders' call to comprehensively improve the strength of the newcomers, from this year onwards, the Welcome Pavilion will cancel the ranking competition system. Replacing it will be a more comprehensive and fair newcomer assessment. All newcomers, please prepare yourselves. The specific assessment rules can be found on the announcement board. What? Abolish the ranking system? There was an uproar among the rookies. Many of them had been preparing for the ranking competition for the past month. Some of them had even thought of which opponents they would challenge. As for those like Meng Tong and Lin Yi who had a grudge against each other, they had already announced that they would avenge themselves in the qualifier. Who would have thought that the ranking competition, which had been the traditional mechanism of the Welcome Pavilion for the past few decades, would be cancelled? And when Hu Yunfeng ordered someone to post up the rules of the announcement that had been written long ago, there was a flurry of discussion among the rookies. Lin Yi and the others squeezed forward and glanced at it. This newcomer assessment had a total of 6 segments. The assessment involved pressure, defense, spirit herbs, spirit beasts, actual combat, and many other aspects. The assessment would last for 5 months. Points would be assessed at every stage of the assessment, and the final ranking would be based on the accumulated points. Indeed, as Hu Yunfeng had said, this newcomer assessment was much more comprehensive than the previous simple and crude ranking competition. However, there was a very important point that quickly attracted the attention of Lin Yi and the others. This newcomer assessment. The newcomers from the 3 pavilions were actually ranked separately. The top 3 of each pavilion would receive a Foundation Establishment Pill or Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill, and the 4th to 10th place would receive 3 Spirit Jades. After the 10th place there was nothing. This reward rule, other than the reallocation of cave dwellings according to the ranking, and the top 3 being able to choose the medicinal pill, was almost the same as the newcomer assessment in the back mountain 2 days ago. Logically speaking. Just like the previous newcomer assessment, this kind of rule was a good thing for the naturally weak Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies. After all, they were generally weak. If they were to compete with the Rushing Sky Pavilion and Mysterious Pavilion rookies, they could forget about obtaining a Foundation Establishment Pill or Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill. But don't forget, this newcomer assessment had a crucial difference compared to the newcomer assessment in the back mountain. Its ranking would directly affect the allocation of cave dwellings. According to the rules of the previous years, even if it was a new disciple from the Clear Cloud Pavilion, as long as they were strong enough, they would be able to obtain the best cultivation resources, including the cave dwelling. And for someone like Lin Yi who was strong enough, he could even obtain the cave dwelling at the peak of the mountain. However, if it was changed to this newcomer assessment, although it might be a blessing for the weak, it was equivalent to naturally erasing the chance of them surpassing the Rushing Sky Pavilion and Mysterious Pavilion rookies. In other words, for a Blue Cloud Pavilion rookie like Lin Yi, no matter how strong he was, he could no longer hope for the first cave dwelling on the mountain top. Even if he could easily crush his opponent, it would be useless. The first cave dwelling on the mountain top should belong to Rushing Sky Pavilion, and it would forever belong to Rushing Sky Pavilion. The newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion should never think of touching it. In the previous ranking competition, the newcomers of the 3 pavilions were all at the same starting line. What kind of cultivation resources they could obtain, it was entirely up to their own strength to fight for it. It was basically considered fair. However, this time's newcomer assessment, although there were a lot of tricks and it looked more scientific, in fact, it was naturally biased towards the newcomers of Rushing Sky Pavilion. This was the so-called fairer newcomer assessment. Lin Yi couldn't help but sneer. Although he had no interest in the first cave dwelling on the mountain top at this moment, his heart still gave birth to a sense of annoyance. This assessment is clearly biased towards the newcomers of Rushing Sky Pavilion. Even if their strength is bad, they can still sit back and enjoy the best cave dwelling without any worries. Pavilion Master Hu, do you still have the face to claim that this is fair? Xiao Hongkai suddenly shouted. He was a straightforward person who hated evil. On the first day he came to the Welcome Pavilion, he dared to question the injustice. At this time, naturally, he would not shrink back. And his doubt not only resonated with some of the newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion, but even these old men of Mysterious Pavilion also responded. Among them, Dongfang Badeo and a few others were the most indignant. The reason was very simple. Compared with the newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion who were naturally weak, these old men of Mysterious Pavilion were generally tyrannical. If they could challenge across pavilions, they had enough confidence to pull down these second-generation cultivators of Rushing Sky Pavilion. Chapter 3704. Looking at the agitated newcomers from Mysterious Pavilion and Blue Cloud Pavilion, Hu Yunfeng did not seem worried at all. Instead, he said calmly, "The newcomer assessment rules were approved by the Elders Guild. If you have any objections, you can protest to the Elders Guild. I won't stop you." That one sentence caused all the newcomers to choke speechless. The Elders Guild was the existence that stood at the peak of the entire North Island. A group of newcomers who had not even reached the foundation establishment stage dared to protest to the Elders Guild? Even if they wanted to die, this was not the way to do it. Lin Yi shook his head helplessly. With the backing of the Elders Guild, Hu Yunfeng had nothing to fear. It could be seen that the three major pavilions were gradually being controlled by Soaring Sky Pavilion. This was indeed true. Otherwise, the assessment rules that obviously favored the newcomers from Soaring Sky Pavilion would not have been approved by the Elders Guild. After a short pause, seeing that the new disciples were silent, Hu Yunfeng nodded in satisfaction and continued, "But in order to avoid any resentment in your hearts, saying that the rules are deliberately biased towards the Soaring Sky Pavilion's new disciples, after this year's new disciple assessment, the Profound Secrets Pavilion and Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciples will have one last chance to challenge each other. As long as you win, you will be able to obtain the other's cultivation dwelling. This way you should have nothing to say, right?" The newcomers looked at each other, then nodded and gave up. However, there was still something fishy about this. For example, the newcomer assessment lasted for 5 months. In addition to the month that had already passed, by the time the assessment ended, the Soaring Sky Pavilion's newcomers would have occupied the best cave abode for half a year. This half a year was enough for them to leave the newcomers from the other 2 pavilions behind. However, having a chance to challenge was better than nothing. At least they could hope for the next half of the year. Otherwise, they would not even have a chance for the next half of the year. Looking at the newcomers who had given up, Lin Yi could not help but sigh secretly, hit with a stick and then give a date to eat. The thorny situation that was originally difficult to appease was so easily resolved. This pavilion leader Hu Yunfeng's methods could be said to be shrewd and ruthless. Hu Yunfeng had long expected this scene. He paused for a moment and said, "Before the official start of this newcomer assessment, this pavilion master has something else to announce. Due to the many segments of the newcomer assessment, in addition to the 2 stewards of each of the 3 pavilions, there was a need for an additional newcomer deacon to be responsible for the calculation and announcement of the points. Of course, this task required a lot of effort and was considered a free service for everyone, so it would definitely affect the person's assessment results. Therefore, in addition to the new deacon's monthly salary, we will also give this newcomer 50 assessment points as compensation." As soon as he finished speaking, the audience immediately started discussing spiritedly. The matter of the new deacon had already been voted by the public at the beginning of last month. In the end, although Kang Mingming's votes far surpassed Zhang Lixing of the Mysterious Pavilion under Su Lingcheng's care, it didn't exceed 2/3 of the votes. It could only be left empty for now. However, even though they were both new deacons, their previous responsibilities were only in charge of the distribution of low-level missions, and the rewards weren't that great. However, this time, the new deacon in charge of calculating the points would receive 50 assessment points as compensation in addition to their regular salary. This made all the rookies present envious. One had to know that in the 6 segments of the assessment, one could at most get 50 to 60 points in each segment. There were even a few segments where the first place could not even reach the height of 50 points. In other words, being the new deacon was equivalent to having an additional assessment segment, and this segment would naturally give him full marks. As long as there were no major problems in the 6 assessments, this was the rhythm of a guaranteed first place. All the rookies were burning with passion. They were hoping that this pie that fell from the sky would hit them, but anyone with a discerning eye could tell that this candidate had long been decided internally. As expected, Hu Yunfeng immediately said, "This position will be taken up by Kang Mingming. He was the one who obtained the first place in the previous deacon selection, and he also obtained first place in the Back Mountain trial 2 days ago in Soaring Sky Pavilion, be it prestige or strength. He is the most suitable person to take this position. Do you have any objections? If you have any, raise your hand and say it. Don't privately complain about it being manipulated behind the scenes and affect the image of our welcome pavilion." All the rookies were immediately awakened by a basin of cold water. They looked at each other but no one said a word. Firstly, according to Hu Yunfeng, Kang Mingming indeed had the qualifications to be the new deacon. The others did not have the confidence to compete with him. Secondly, the newcomer assessment was ranked separately by the 3 pavilions, which meant that even if Kang Mingming became the new deacon, the greatest impact would be on the Soaring Sky Pavilion's own rookies. It had little to do with the Mysterious Pavilion and Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies. And the Soaring Sky Pavilion rookies had always been obedient to Su Lingchong. Letting Kang Ming be the new deacon was entirely Su Lingchong's idea, so they naturally would not object. As for the other two pavilions, it was none of their business, so there was no need for them to seek their own misfortune. Since none of you are saying anything, it seems like there are no objections. Then it's decided. From today onwards, Kang Ming will be your new deacon. Wu Yunfeng immediately announced. Thank you, thank you. Kang Ming smiled and cupped his hands at the rookies. He was so proud of himself that it made the rookies envious. However, it was useless to be envious. He had the support of young Master Su Lingchong. Actually, there were some who were not convinced, but they did not dare to say it out loud. Wu Yunfeng directly said those who had objections to raise their hands. Wasn't that the same as shooting the bird that poked its head out? Qiao Hongkai wanted to speak, but she was held back by Lin Yi, who smiled faintly and shook his head. This so-called newcomer deacon might be a very impressive and lucrative position in the eyes of others, but in Lin Yi's eyes, it was nothing. It was a waste of time for him to be the deacon. If he had the time, he might as well go to the Spirit Jade mine and dig out some waste jade. After selecting the newcomer deacon, the next step was to familiarize himself with the rules. After that, the newcomer assessment would officially begin. The 6 segments would be completed within the next 5 months. After looking carefully at the content of the first segment, Lin Yi could not help but laugh. It was yet another familiar test, resisting coercion. Don't forget, when he participated in the Hidden Families Summit in the secular world, he had experienced such a test. Now that he had to face a similar situation, it was as if he was very familiar with it. Chapter 3705. The test venue for this round was not in the Welcome Pavilion. The group of rookies were led by Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng and their respective managing senior brothers, and after an hour of walking, they arrived at their destination. Although the destination was the same grand and majestic building as the Welcome Pavilion and Spirit Jade Hall, before the rookies even reached it, they felt an unprecedented killing intent and pressure surging towards them. Some of the weaker rookies even staggered and almost made a fool of themselves in public. This display of strength was exactly the same as the time when they went to the back mountain hall, except that back then, they were frightened by the power of the 3 elder-level experts. But this time there was no one in front of them, only an empty and magnificent building. Compared to the heavily guarded Spirit Jade Hall and Back Mountain Hall, there was not even a shadow of a guard here. Only the huge signboard above their heads proclaimed the supreme majesty of this place. Law Enforcement Hall. In the imagination of the rookies, a place like the Law Enforcement Hall was definitely a place where experts were as numerous as the clouds. The heavy security should only be more than that of Spirit Jade Hall and Back Mountain Hall. However, the scene in front of them was completely different from what they imagined. There was not a single guard, and other than a few experts with restrained aura hurriedly shuttling through the corridors of the building, there was almost no one else. But even so, this place still made the rookies tremble for no reason. It was as if after coming here, all their disguises and psychological defenses were instantly stripped away, and all their secrets were exposed. The legendary Law Enforcement Hall was indeed an unfathomable place. Lin Yi could not help but praise in his heart. Even if they were thrown here without doing anything, it was already a form of pressure resistance test. And compared to the suppression of true qi in the secular world, this pressure was clearly more brilliant and powerful. It had already exceeded the level of the flesh, and even the mind would be unable to withstand it. It was not something that could be offset by the body's true qi. Lin Yi believed that most of the people present would not be able to withstand it for long before having a mental breakdown. Law Enforcement Hall, including the layout of all the surrounding buildings. At the beginning of its construction, it was naturally an extremely powerful pressure array. Do you see that circular high platform in the middle of the square? Hu Yunfeng pointed to a place not far away and said, "That is the place used to execute criminals. It is also the place where the formation is the most powerful. As for you, you will take the first test on that high platform." Everyone looked over. The high platform that Hu Yunfeng was pointing at looked ordinary, except for its location in the middle of the plaza. There was nothing strange about it. However, when everyone carefully stared at it, their hearts inexplicably palpitated in unison, as if they would be swallowed by it in the next moment. This place is very dangerous. Was it really okay to let so many newcomers who hadn't even reached the Foundation establishment realm to take the test? A guy with a slightly weaker will would probably have a nervous breakdown very quickly. He might even go crazy on the spot. While Lin Yi was puzzled, he heard Hu Yunfeng say, "Later I will specially invite a few law enforcement hall experts to control the array on the high platform. But don't misunderstand, I didn't invite them to increase the difficulty of the test. On the contrary, their task is to help you reduce the pressure on the array. Otherwise, all of you here will definitely not be able to last more than the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn." Hu Yunfeng's words were not alarmist talk. If the power of the law enforcement hall's pressure array was really activated, not to mention a bunch of experts at the peak of heaven stage, even an expert at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm late stage would be suppressed to the point of bleeding from the 7 orifices in a moment. There was no possibility of survival. And now this state. Although the pressure array had not been fully activated, the pressure on the circular high platform was definitely not something that the newcomers present could bear. Someone must control the array to reduce the pressure for them. After a while, the newcomers came down to the side of the circular high platform under Hu Yunfeng's lead. Even if they hadn't stood on the high platform, everyone already felt that it was a lot more strenuous. This kind of place was really not for ordinary people to stay. No wonder people often said that anyone who came to the law enforcement hall would no longer have any secrets. Although this was somewhat exaggerated. But it was still worthy of the name. Just think about it, no matter how strong an expert was, they would definitely be mentally exhausted under such pressure. Moreover, there was no lack of experts in the law enforcement hall that were proficient in mental martial techniques. If they revealed even the slightest flaw, they would immediately be taken advantage of. Thus, the so-called secrets would naturally not be mentioned. But what made Lin Yi feel more fortunate was that he was here today to accept the newcomer's test and not appear as a criminal. Otherwise, there was a possibility that the secrets on him would really be exposed. At this moment, the few law enforcement hall experts that Hu Yunfeng mentioned were already in place. What made Lin Yi more surprised was that he actually saw 2 familiar faces beside this group of people. One was Su Lingchong. This guy was not a member of the law enforcement hall at all. 2 days ago at the back mountain hall, he had already made things difficult for him. Now that he had appeared here like a ghost, he must be up to some bad tricks again. And the other person was Laner, who he had just met in the woods yesterday. Of course, there was also her inseparable little curly bear. After discovering Lin Yi in the crowd, the little curly bear immediately whimpered and wanted to pounce on Lin Yi. However, it was held back by Shanghai Laner. Today was different from the past. They were going to enter the assessment soon. She could not let the little curly bear affect Lin Yi's state. Moreover, she had just promised Lin Yi yesterday that she would cooperate with him to put on an act. At this moment there were so many people watching. Naturally she had to pretend to hate Lin Yi. It was even more impossible for her to let the little curly bear get close to Lin Yi. However, although Shanghai Laner appeared to be very disgusted when she glanced at Lin Yi, there was a clear hint of warning and worry in her eyes. The reason why she came today was actually because she was invited by Su Lingchong. After the previous act, Su Lingchong was convinced that she had completely fallen out with Lin Yi. Therefore, he specially invited her to the law enforcement hall to observe the newcomer's test. He said that he wanted to take the opportunity to deal with Lin Yi in order to win the beauty's favor. And with young Master Su's influence, even if he was not a member of the law enforcement hall, it would be easy to deal with Lin Yi. It just so happened that among the law enforcement hall experts that Hu Yunfeng invited, there were people he was familiar with. He just needed to greet them and let them take the opportunity to deal with Lin Yi. It was just a matter of a sentence. Chapter 3706. After all, with her presence, if Lin Yi was really in danger, she could come forward to stop it. At most, people would see through her relationship with Lin Yi, but at least she could guarantee Lin Yi's safety. Su Lingchong naturally didn't notice Shanghai Laner's little thoughts. He thought that this miss would like the program he arranged. Little did he know, she was the little senior sister who claimed to protect Lin Yi. Looking at Lin Yi in the crowd, Su Lingchong smiled coldly. This was the first time he arranged a pressure resistance test for a newcomer. It wouldn't be too surprising if some accident happened in the process and an unlucky newcomer died. As Su Lingchong didn't discuss it with Meng Jueguang and the others, it was completely his own idea. Therefore, whether it was Zhong Pingliang or Li Jingming, they couldn't provide any information to Lin Yi beforehand. However, the warning look in Shanghai Laner's eyes was enough to explain the problem. Lin Yi had long sensed the fatal danger. After all, during the Hidden Noble House Summit in the secular world, there were people who wanted to kill him. This time it was just that it was Su Lingchong, it was nothing new. However, although he had already sensed that the other party was up to no good, Lin Yi didn't have the slightest intention of retreating, because he was confident that he could escape unscathed. After reiterating the rules, Hu Yunfeng let all the newcomers enter the high platform and accept the pressure test together. At that time, the points of the newcomers from the three great pavilions would be evaluated separately, and it wouldn't affect each other. The points of the pressure resistance test would be obtained by adding up two parts. One was the time limit points and the other was the ranking points. The so-called time limit points were based on how long you could last. If it was more than 1 incense stick's time, you would get 5 points. 2 incense sticks time was 10 points, and 3 incense sticks time was 15 points. And so on until 30 points were capped. The so-called ranking points were based on your ranking among the newcomers from the three great pavilions. If you lasted the longest and ranked first, you would get 15 points, second would get 14 points, and so on. The 15th place at the bottom only had 1 point. In theory, in this pressure resistance assessment round, the person with the highest score would be able to obtain 30 time limit points and 15 ranking points at the same time, adding up to 45 points. Of course, it was basically impossible to get full marks in this theory. A normal person could only last for the time it took for 3 incense sticks to burn. As for those who wanted to last for more than 6 incense sticks worth of time limit points, it was impossible. Pretentious newbie, I hope you can survive this round. I'm still waiting for a chance to wash away my shame. Ah. On the way into the arena, Meng Tong deliberately leaned over and showed off his biceps, fully displaying the aura of an early-stage foundation establishment expert. This idiot actually broke through the early stage of the foundation establishment realm? Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai glanced at each other in shock. Although each of them had a foundation building pill in their hands, they weren't like Meng Tong who could get the foundation establishment elixir from Su Lingchong, so they didn't dare to take it until now. However, Lin Yi wasn't surprised at all. After all, he had already received information beforehand that this guy had taken both the foundation establishment pill and the foundation establishment elixir. If he still couldn't succeed in the foundation establishment realm, then he was really trash. Not only had Meng Tong succeeded in the foundation establishment realm, but he had also specially observed Kong Ming Ming and Zhong Pingliang. Both of them were now experts in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. Putting everything else aside, just from the perspective of cultivation resources, it was really a wise move for them to cling tightly to Su Lingchong's thick thigh. And including Lin Yi himself, in just a month's time, there were already 4 people who had succeeded in the foundation establishment realm. This was simply unimaginable in previous years. Of course, this was mainly due to the foundation establishment pill. This guy was just lucky. It's not a big deal even if he succeeded. You guys don't have to take it to heart. The most important thing now is to deal with this pressure test and strive for a good start. However, safety first. Later, you still have to act according to your capabilities. Don't be blindly impulsive, Lin Yi warned the two sternly. He was experienced and knew that in this kind of pressure test, one's mind absolutely couldn't be mixed with too many distracting thoughts. Otherwise, it would be very easy for problems to occur. Especially when they were facing the law enforcement hall's pressure formation this time. In addition to the common true chi pressure, there was also a faint mental pressure. Under the double attack of the physical and mental body, the slightest carelessness would cause one to collapse. There was no room for carelessness and they couldn't blindly try to be brave. Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai both nodded. They weren't people who didn't know when to advance or retreat. Although points were important, they first had to be alive to fight for it. The newcomer assessment had a total of 6 stages. This was only the first one. There was still a long way to go. Upon entering the circular platform, Zhang Xian immediately felt his body sink. Not only was his body being crushed by the powerful Jinqi, even his spirit felt as if it was being shackled by a heavy shackle. All of his nerves were stretched taut, giving off the feeling that they could snap at any moment. And at the same time that their minds were being suppressed, the true chi in their bodies also began to gradually stagnate. This in turn caused the physical pressure and destruction to become even more severe, further increasing the burden on their minds. The two affected each other, forming an extremely terrifying vicious cycle. Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh. This pressure test was indeed far more difficult than the Hidden House Summit in the secular world. After all the newcomers from the 3 great pavilions had entered and sat down, Hu Yunfeng exchanged glances with a few other law enforcement hall experts who were also seated. They then signaled for the first incense to be lit. The first pressure test had officially begun. No matter what level of strength one was at, the pressure test had always been an excellent way to test one's talent and potential. This was especially true for a formation like the one before them that could simultaneously exert pressure on both the physical and mental body. Everyone's talent and potential could be seen at a glance, and it was very easy to distinguish who was better and who was worse. After all, if it was purely physical pressure, it would completely depend on the strength of the true chi in each person's body. This would only be able to test one's current strength, but not their future potential. In other words, even if one relied purely on the accumulation of medicinal pills and had no so-called potential to develop, as long as one's strength was enough, it would be enough to obtain high points in this kind of pure physical pressure test. However, once spiritual pressure was added at the same time, the effect would be completely different. Relying on true chi might be able to resist for a while, but if one's will wasn't strong enough under the pressure of the vicious cycle, no matter how strong the true chi in one's body was, it would not be able to last long. Chapter 3707. For cultivators, strength could only represent a moment, but willpower was the key to reaching the limit of strength in the future. Only those who were equally strong in strength and willpower could obtain enough points in such a test. Otherwise, no matter which aspect of strength or willpower was lacking, it would be impossible to obtain high points in this test. This was the only way to reflect the significance of the newcomer assessment and the value of every point. One had to know that every point in the newcomer assessment would be recorded into the archives of the three great pavilions, affecting the recognition of each newcomer by the three great pavilions. The number of points not only determined whether one would have an advantage in the newcomer assessment, but it also affected the treatment one would receive after entering the three great pavilions. After all, even the three great pavilions had limited resources for training. When the time came, would these resources be allocated to the weaklings with low points and weak in all aspects, or to the geniuses with high points and strong in all aspects? The answer was obvious. Lin Yi wasn't the only one who knew this. All the other newcomers present knew this as well, so none of them dared to slack off. They had to give it their all. Otherwise, not only would he lose at the starting line, but he would also lose his entire cultivation career. After the test officially began, all the newcomers from the three great pavilions channeled their own arts to resist the pressure, giving it their all as if they were facing a great enemy. They were afraid that the slightest bit of carelessness would cause them to slip up. However, there were a few people who were clearly more relaxed than the others. Kang Mingming, Zhong Pingliang, Meng Tong, and Lin Yi were all masters at the early stage of foundation establishment. Their strength was much higher than the other newcomers who hadn't succeeded yet, so it was naturally easier for them to deal with the pressure. After all, disregarding the strength of their willpower, the four of them were strong, so they naturally had more capital than the others. If everyone's willpower was on the same level, then they would undoubtedly have the last laugh. Among the four of them, Lin Yi was the most at ease. This wasn't just because he was a master at the early stage of foundation establishment, which was a level higher than the other three. More importantly, he had the space in the jade pendant behind him, and could quickly replenish the chi in his body at any time. In other words, if it was like the Hidden House Summit in the mortal world, and it was just purely physical pressure, it didn't matter how long he wanted to sit here because the chi in his body wouldn't run out. However, this time, there was an additional layer of superior spiritual pressure. This was a brand new test for Lin Yi. But even so, he was still far more relaxed than the others. The same principle applied to him. His capital was far more abundant than everyone else's combined. There was no need to worry about his real chi being exhausted. As long as he focused on dealing with the mental pressure, this was the biggest advantage that Lin Yi had over the others present. In terms of willpower, don't forget that this guy was a strong person who had slaughtered his way up from the mortal world. He was calm and collected even after being criticized several times. Moreover, he had always been stronger than the strong and never retreated. How could he lose to others with this kind of willpower? Bullshit. However, while Lin Yi could remain calm, the others present did not have the ability to do so. They did not have a strong will like him. After persisting for a few moments, fine beads of sweat began to appear on the rookies' foreheads as they slid down bit by bit. This was a sign that they were beginning to find it strenuous. It should be known that cultivators who had reached the level of Heaven Stage Great Circle, under normal circumstances, no matter how intense the exercise was or how high the surrounding temperature was, as long as the true chi in their body had not been exhausted, it was absolutely impossible to have this kind of ordinary fatigue. And once this kind of fatigue appeared, it meant that their current state was not far from that of a weak ordinary person. Sure enough, after just half an incense stick of time, the first person to withdraw appeared. It was a rookie from the Blue Cloud Pavilion. Although only half an incense stick of time had passed, when he walked out of the high platform, his legs were already trembling. However, his legs were already trembling, and his entire body was already soaked in his own sweat. This person looked back unwillingly. In the end, he could only hang his head dejectedly and move with heavy footsteps to the rest area at the side. He did not persist for the incense stick of time. This meant that his assessment points were 0. Being the first to withdraw meant that his ranking points were only 1 point. Adding up the 2 points, his assessment points for the first segment was a pitiful 1 point. This was already the lowest number of points that could be obtained in theory. Even if others wanted to score lower than him, it was impossible. However, no matter how unwilling he was, the result of 1 point was already a foregone conclusion. Meng Jueguang and senior brother Ku Bai, the 2 senior stewards of the Blue Cloud Pavilion, had already recorded his name. After this, it would be handed over to the new deacon Kong Ming to announce it. There was no possibility of any changes. If he was given another chance, even if he knew that he would become a shameful laughingstock, he could only grit his teeth and make the same choice. After all, if he overestimated his ability and continued to force his way in, not only would he not be able to obtain more points, he might even lose his life here. This was not a joke. After the first precedent, there was soon a second and a third. When the pavilion master, Hu Yunfeng, ordered someone to light the second incense stick, the field was already 1/3 empty. In other words, 1/3 of the rookies from the 3 pavilions could not persist for the incense stick of time and had no choice but to withdraw. This was in line with the words on the notice. There were 6 segments in the rookie assessment, and every point was not easy to obtain. Up until this moment, Lin Yi was still at ease and did not feel any obvious pressure. Although there were signs of fatigue due to the mental pressure, it did not affect the circulation of vital energy in his body. This, in turn, reduced the pressure on Lin Yi so that there would not be a vicious cycle of mental and physical drag on each other. All the rookies, including Lin Yi, knew that once a vicious cycle occurred, it meant that they were not far from being eliminated. When the second incense stick of time was lit, many of the rookies in the field heaved a sigh of relief. Not long after, they began to withdraw one after another. The torture of this double pressure was not something that a normal person could endure. To be able to persist for the full incense stick of time and obtain 5 points was already a satisfactory result for them. Since they knew that there was no hope of persisting until the second incense stick of time burned out, instead of fighting for those few points, they might as well withdraw. This way they would not have to risk their lives. Chapter 3708. However, what surprised everyone was that among these 10 people, there were actually 4 newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion, which was more than half of the total number of newcomers from Soaring Sky Pavilion and Mysterious Pavilion. These 4 people were Meng Tong, Xiao Ran, Qiao Hongkai and Lin Yi. Apart from them, there were 3 people from Soaring Sky Pavilion and Mysterious Pavilion. Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng's face darkened. Although the assessment points of the 3 pavilions were calculated separately, the comparison was clear at a glance. If someone with ulterior motives spread the news, the higher-ups might think that he was incompetent as the pavilion master of Welcoming Pavilion. After all, he had the backing of Soaring Sky Pavilion. If he couldn't even take care of the newcomers from Soaring Sky Pavilion, and instead let the weak newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion climb above him, how could he bear it? But fortunately, not long after the third incense stick was lit, 2 newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion withdrew first, which made Hu Yunfeng's expression soften a little. But fortunately, not long after the third incense stick was lit, 2 newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion withdrew first, which made Hu Yunfeng's expression soften a little. At this moment, the 2 people who withdrew were Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai. Whether it was strength or willpower, the 2 of them were considered outstanding among the experts at Heaven Stage Full Circle. But in the end, they were only more powerful at Heaven Stage Full Circle, and still couldn't be compared to the experts at the early stage of Foundation Establishment stage. For the 2 of them, to be able to persist for more than 2 incense sticks was already quite commendable, and this result was already a level higher than the others. And right at this moment, Su Lingchong, who was below the stage, suddenly gave a meaningful glance to the few law enforcement hall experts on the stage, and they nodded without a trace. After that, in an instant, the dual pressure that poured down on Lin Yi's head abruptly increased, and was more than twice as strong as before. Lin Yi, who was trapped in it, suddenly had a thought. After waiting for so long, these people were finally going to make a move on him. One must know that in this pressure assessment, there was no such thing as increasing the pressure midway. In theory, the intensity should be the same from beginning to end. The reason why they didn't directly target Lin Yi was because Su Lingchong and these law enforcement hall experts had all the misgivings. The reason was very simple. Although they could easily adjust the intensity of the pressure around Lin Yi was, after all, an expert in the early stage of Foundation establishment on the surface. If he was killed on the stage in the first incense stick, it would be too strange. Now that the third incense stick had burned, the time was truly ripe. Because he had persisted for the first 2 incense sticks of time. At this time, even an expert in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm was starting to be unable to hold on. Even if Lin Yi died on the stage, it wouldn't be too surprising. After others heard about it, they would at most sneer and say that the secular world was full of fake experts, but they would not suspect them. After the time it took for 2 incense sticks to burn, the pressure suddenly doubled, which was like running a marathon for 20 kilometers. Suddenly, a sandbag equal to your weight was pressed on your body. This difficulty was not as simple as doubling the numbers, but 10 times or even 20 times. If it weren't for Lin Yi, but Kang Ming and the other experts in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, they would have been caught off guard and spit out a mouthful of old blood. It was not impossible for them to be seriously injured or even die on the spot. What a pity. Their target was Lin Yi, not only an expert in the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm who had hidden his strength, but also a strong man with an extremely strong will who sat in the space of the jade pendant. Twice the pressure was enough to crush any newcomer on the scene, but they couldn't do anything to Lin Yi. Twice the pressure had already begun to make Lin Yi feel a little strenuous, but that was all. With his current mental state, plus the true qi in the space of the jade pendant, at this level, it was still not a big problem for him to persist for the time it took for 2 incense sticks of time. Lin Yi's calm performance from beginning to end made the few experts of the law enforcement hall dumbfounded. Below the field, Su Lingchong was still signaling them with his eyes, hinting them to quickly make a move on Lin Yi. Little did they know that they had already made a move, it was just that they didn't show it on Lin Yi. This kid really had some ability. A mere newcomer from the secular world was actually able to withstand such a strong pressure with a normal expression. No wonder even a young master like Su Lingchong had to specially target him. The few experts of the law enforcement hall were secretly shocked, but this was something that Su Lingchong had ordered them to do. It was absolutely impossible for them to stop just like that. After a tacit exchange of glances, they immediately joined hands to increase the pressure around Lin Yi's body again, directly to the intensity of 3 times the pressure. For a moment, the pressure on Lin Yi's body became heavier, and his spirit finally began to feel a little tired. The true qi circulation of the art of dragon mastery in his body also became a little blocked, but the problem wasn't too big. At least it hadn't reached the point of a vicious cycle, and he could still continue to persevere. However, there was no problem on Lin Yi's side, but Meng Tong, who was not far from him, was the first to suffer. One must know that, including all the surrounding buildings, the pressure formation of the law enforcement hall was a natural whole. Even if these few experts of the law enforcement hall could join hands to adjust the intensity of the pressure in a part of the area, it was impossible to completely accurately adjust it to a single person, and the people around him would inevitably be affected. In other words, at the same time that they released 3 times the pressure on top of Lin Yi's head, Meng Tong, who was not far from Lin Yi, was similarly affected. It was just that at this moment, although the pressure that descended on top of his head was not 3 times as exaggerated, it was still 2 times. 2 times the pressure on Lin Yi was not a big deal, but on Meng Tong it was fatal. Don't forget, although he was an expert in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, he had only broken through yesterday with the help of the Foundation establishment elixir and the Foundation establishment elixir. He was an out-and-out newbie in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. Compared to the other experts in the heaven stage, he was naturally full of confidence, but in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm of the same level, he was just a weak newbie. Meng Tong was already a little strained, and at this time the pressure on his body suddenly doubled. Caught off guard, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. This scene immediately caused a burst of exclamation from the other newbies. This was the first newbie to be forced to spit out blood today, and it was one of the 4 early-stage experts, Meng Tong. It was really a little surprising. After spitting out blood, Meng Tong did not dare to stay on the stage any longer. He hurriedly staggered down, afraid that he would lose his little life on the stage. Fuck. You guys are fucking messing with me on purpose. After getting off the stage, Meng Tong's first reaction was to curse at the few experts of the law enforcement hall on the stage, causing an uproar among the other newbies. Chapter 3709. In the end, he didn't expect that because of such an inexplicable turn of events, there was still no abnormality on Lin Yi's side. Instead, he, Meng Tong, had become the unluckiest person. It would be strange if he wasn't depressed after encountering such a thing. However, just as he cursed, Meng Tong's little bit of dissatisfaction was immediately forced back by Su Lingqiong's stern gaze. Although he didn't know about Su Lingqiong's arrangements beforehand, if he didn't react to it after experiencing it himself, then he was really stupid. Seeing that Meng Tong finally realized the crux of the problem, Su Lingqiong heaved a sigh of relief. Instructing the law enforcement hall's experts to secretly target Lin Yi was something that absolutely couldn't be exposed. If Meng Tong revealed this little trick in front of everyone's eyes, then it would really be big trouble. Fortunately, although this fellow was stupid, he wasn't stupid to the point where he would reveal everything. When the others heard his cursing just now, they would at most feel that it was inexplicable, but they wouldn't be able to guess the reason behind it. However, senior brother Ku Bai Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai heard the hidden meaning in his words. Meng Tong's words just now definitely had a lot of meaning. Although they weren't sure what exactly happened to Meng Tong just now, when they looked at the stage again, their gazes were obviously filled with worry. One must know that these law enforcement hall elders were all acquaintances of Su Lingqiong. Even if they deliberately targeted Lin Yi, the biggest target would definitely be Lin Yi and not Meng Tong. Meng Tong might be the fish in the moat that got injured because he was caught in the crossfire. Now that Meng Tong, who was an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment stage, had already been pushed aside in their understanding, Lin Yi, who was also in the early stage of the foundation establishment stage, would definitely be under more pressure, and his situation would definitely be more difficult. Although it was said that in any segment, if one could fight for a little bit of points, one's personal safety was more important in comparison. One mustn't risk one's life forcefully for a little bit of points, it wasn't worth it. However, they were Lin Yi's accomplices. At this time, even if they guessed that Lin Yi was in a difficult situation, they couldn't help him at all. They couldn't even warn him because that would disturb Lin Yi's concentration, which could easily cause a big problem. The only thing they could do was to silently pray for Lin Yi to be fine. Otherwise, they might have to prepare to collect Lin Yi's corpse. At this moment, while the bitter senior brother and the others were worried about Lin Yi, the law enforcement hall experts on the stage looked at each other awkwardly. Not only did they not hurt Lin Yi, but they also made Meng Tong die unjustly. This was a little embarrassing. Fortunately, when the fourth incense was lit, only Lin Yi, Kong Ming and Zhong Pingliang were left. Fortunately, they were far away from Lin Yi, so they wouldn't end up like Meng Tong. 4 times the pressure. The pressure on Lin Yi's body suddenly increased by a layer. His spirit was more tired, and the circulation of the true qi in his body became more stagnant and blocked, making it impossible to completely block the external true qi's strong pressure on his body like before. In this way, it also increased the burden on his spirit, and the vicious cycle effect that was often seen in others finally appeared. At this time, even with the space of the jade pendant that could quickly replenish true qi, Lin Yi obviously began to feel tired. This kid finally couldn't hold on anymore. Several law enforcement hall elders stared at Lin Yi's performance, and at this time they finally breathed a sigh of relief. Even so, the performance of Lin Yi, a newcomer in the secular world, was enough to impress them. Looking at the whole 3 pavilions, there were only a few people who could resist 4 times the pressure at the early stage of foundation establishment, not to mention that Lin Yi had held on in the field for a full 3 incense sticks of time. After holding on for a while, seeing that the 4th incense stick was about to burn out, Lin Yi knew that his condition was not suitable to continue, so he planned to withdraw from the field after getting the points of the time limit of 4 incense sticks of time. As long as he chose to withdraw in time. Even these law enforcement hall experts couldn't do anything to him, and the points of the time limit of 4 incense sticks of time and the points of the first place in Blue Cloud Pavilion were already quite considerable, so there was no need to take the risk and ask for more. However, at the last moment when the 4th incense stick was about to burn out, when he thought that he had achieved his goal and relaxed the most, the jade pendant's warning suddenly sounded in his mind. The pressure on Lin Yi's body suddenly increased a lot, from 4 times the pressure to 6 times in an instant and still increasing. Such a sudden change, even with the advance warning from the jade pendant, Lin Yi was caught unprepared. He felt a sweetness in his throat and almost spat out blood, but in the end he managed to hold it back and a chill rose in his heart. These people, it's not as simple as just targeting me, they simply want to take this opportunity to kill me. Seeing that Lin Yi was obviously on the verge of collapse, the law enforcement hall experts all sneered. Young Master Su had specifically instructed them to treat this Lin Yi well. Even if they didn't kill him directly, they should at least seriously injure him. How could they let him walk out unscathed? It was too late to retreat at this time. It seemed that this time he really had to pay the price of a little injury. Lin Yi thought in his heart, even if the opponent did this to him, he still had enough confidence to hold on until he left the field. It was just a little injury, and for someone like him who could easily heal himself, this was not a painful price to pay. And just as Lin Yi forced himself to stand up, the ghost's voice suddenly sounded in his mind, "Kid, do you need this old man's help?" Lin Yi was stunned, and after listening to the ghost's words, the corner of his mouth slightly curled up, and then he calmly sat back down on the ground. What the hell is this guy doing? The audience suddenly burst into an uproar. Those with discerning eyes could see that Lin Yi was already at his limit. It was already amazing that he could force himself to leave the field, but he actually dared to sit back down at this time. Could it be that he really didn't want his life for such a laughable amount of points? This Lin Yi does have some strength, but unfortunately he doesn't have a brain. Life and points, he can't even distinguish which is more important. It seems that even if he can walk out alive, he will not have a future in the future. The other newcomers should take this as a warning. Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng saw the situation and lightly commented. Chapter 37:10. Su Lingchong sneered and said, "It seems that you guys can quickly find a piece of shroud and prepare it. If he directly went down just now, I guess he would only be seriously injured, at least his life would not be in danger. But now that he is greedy for points and sat back down, it will be impossible for him to think about it again. You guys just wait to collect his corpse." Originally this young Master Su felt that it was a pity. After all, from Lin Yi's performance just now, he could at most seriously injure him, but there was no way to kill him. But now, this fellow Lin Yi actually sat back down in the middle of the battle. He was simply seeking his own death. A sin committed by heaven could be forgiven, but a sin committed by oneself could not be avoided. Since this idiot Lin Yi wanted to court death, then he could not blame others. After saying that, Su Lingchong turned his head to look at Shanghai Laner and said ingratiatingly, "Previously this idiot Lin Yi actually dared to provoke our junior sister Lana. He was simply courting death. And now he overestimated his own strength and wanted to put up a strong front. He really asked for it and no one could stop him. It just so happens that junior sister can vent your anger." At this moment, Shanghai Laner was conflicted in her heart whether she should stand up to save Lin Yi. Hearing this, she glanced at him and said, "This is all you're doing?" "Hee sort of, but I didn't ask him to sit back down. As the old saying goes, if you don't court death, you won't die. If he didn't cooperate, I really couldn't do anything to him." Su Lingchong whispered proudly. Shanghai Laner frowned. Although she was worried about Lin Yi's safety, when she thought that this was Lin Yi's own choice, she chose to wait and see for a while. Even though she did not have much contact with Lin Yi, but her intuition told her that Lin Yi was definitely not such an idiot who overestimated his own strength. She had already made up her mind that even if Lin Yi really made a mistake this time, she would wait until she was sure that he was in danger before coming forward to stop him. At this time, senior brother Ku Bai and the others almost have the same mentality as her. Compared with Shanghai Laner, they know Lin Yi better. He knew that Lin Yi wouldn't have acted so rashly if he didn't have the confidence. He must have his reasons for doing so. However, even if they believed in Lin Yi, they still couldn't help but worry. After all, this wasn't a joke. At the same time, Meng Tong and the other Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies mocked him. He was full of sarcasm. When they recalled the last time they were in the back mountain, Lin Yi relied on his fake early-stage foundation building aura to scare and extort them. They couldn't help but gnash their teeth in hatred. Now that they saw Lin Yi bring misfortune upon himself, it was simply too satisfying. Only Li Jingming, who was standing among them, seemed to be sneering as well. But he wasn't sneering at Lin Yi, but at the group of ridiculous idiots around him. Looking at the whole audience, including senior brother Ku Bai and the others, he was the only one who knew Lin Yi's real strength. As a freak who could break through to the peak of the early-stage foundation building within a month after entering the Welcome Pavilion, how could the mediocre people like them understand what Lin Yi did? Li Jingming felt now. It was like watching a group of sparrows ridiculing a swan for overestimating himself. Little did they know that Suke really had the ability to soar up to 90,000 miles. When you snorted at others, the real idiot was actually yourself in the mirror. Compared with the people below the stage who didn't know the inside story, the experts of the law enforcement hall on the stage were ridiculing Lin Yi's performance at the moment, but they were also confused. It was really hard to understand. One had to know that the pressure on Lin Yi's head had increased by more than 8 times. Not to mention that he was a newbie in the early-stage foundation building realm. Even the experts of the law enforcement hall might not be able to withstand it. Since Lin Yi was able to get to where he was today, he couldn't be an idiot. Even if he was looking for death, even if he was courting death, there was no need for him to choose such a stupid way to die on such an occasion, right? However, the following development really made everyone's jaws drop. After Lin Yi sat back down, his expression actually became extremely relaxed. Not only did he not show any signs of being crushed, but his complexion also began to improve bit by bit. What the hell was going on? For a moment, everyone below the stage didn't know what to say. The group of people, led by Su Lingchong, who spared no effort to call Lin Yi an idiot, were like ducks that were suddenly grabbed by the neck. They didn't even know what to say. Looking at the scene where everyone was speechless, Li Jingming's stomach was about to hurt from laughing too much. As expected of boss Lin Yi, this slap in the face was really fucking crisp. At this time, even an ordinary person could see that Lin Yi didn't show any signs of not being able to do it. Not only was he not unable to do it, but he was also too good. Sitting on the stage was simply like taking a vacation. There was no pressure at all. Shanghai Laner, Ku by Shixiang and the others who were on Lin Yi's side immediately let out a sigh of relief. This fellow Lin Yi really made them enjoy a roller coaster ride with him. After a while, the 5th incense stick was lit. Even Kang Ming and Zhong Pingliang, who weren't affected, finally couldn't hold on anymore and left the stage one after another. Now only Lin Yi was left on the stage. Su Lingchong, Hu Yunfeng and the others looked at each other. Their faces were starting to turn black. What the fuck was going on? Didn't they say that they would deal with Lin Yi and kill Lin Yi? Why did they suddenly become like this? Su Lingchong even started to doubt whether these guys on the stage were actually helping him or not. Otherwise, Lin Yi was obviously at his limit just now. If they really wanted to deal with him, they could just casually add a little pressure and it would be impossible for him to stay until now so easily. Feeling the pressure from Su Lingchong below the stage, the few Hall of Law Enforcement masters looked at each other, clenched their teeth and increased the pressure by a large margin. 12 times the pressure. This was already the limit of what they could control. If they released the restriction again, the power wouldn't be something they could control. At that time, it was very likely that even they themselves would suffer a serious backlash. Anyway, there was no one else on the stage at this moment. There was no need to care about other things. It was enough to deal with this evil Lin Yi. They didn't believe that this kid could even withstand 12 times the pressure. In the hundreds of years since the establishment of the Law Enforcement Hall, there had never been a precedent of a mere early-stage foundation establishment master being able to withstand such a strong pressure. Not to mention the early-stage foundation establishment, even a master at the peak of the late-stage foundation establishment couldn't do it. However, after another incense stick's time, Lin Yi still didn't move. His expression was natural and his breath was steady. It was simply no different from when he first entered the stage. Everyone on the stage was completely speechless. Their faces were all red, and they were ashamed into anger. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.